He was so tired of it. He had to do tasks that benefited others and that only he could do. But that would all change starting today. Yesterday was the first time he had missed work without realizing it. If he needed an excuse, it was for waking up late. The guy fell asleep at the doorstep, or else he failed. For whatever reason, his tears wouldn't stop. He decided he wasn't coming to the meeting anymore and would boycott. The guy was heading somewhere, holding a magical object in his hand. He had only slept longer last night, but he was already feeling better. He was sure they would yell at him again, and he didn't want to go anywhere. The administrator of the Adventurers Guild greeted Ike's warmly. She informed him of the guild master's intentions to speak with him. The man had a disdain for a dumbass wizard who couldn't use the simplest magic. He demanded an explanation as to why the boy thought he was allowed to be absent without permission, but more importantly, why he didn't show up for the meeting. The meetings at the beginning of every month meant nothing, though other adventurers liked them and even motivated them. Ike's was supposed to buff the magic of the other members. The guild master had already asked Aries to do it in his place, for which he should thank her. He realized that it was very difficult to make the Seekers happy. The guild master thought it was too early for him to become an adventurer. Ike's didn't have anything that stood out and was nicknamed as a dumb mage. As punishment, he would be given the lowest rank, which was F. A rank reduction of 3 ranks was absurd. If Ike stripped his blood on an F rank card, he would be registered. But if he did that, he would devalue all the mountain of work he had done. Ike's couldn't budge. The guy couldn't take it anymore. He was sick of putting up with it. He admitted that he really wasn't fit to be an adventurer and thanked him for all the help. The guild master was shocked by his decision and asked him to think it over. It was the first time Ike's had ever seen him make that facial expression, but now he was indifferent to it. Someone's chuckle pierced the silence. The leader of the strongest zombie clan, Pans, was pleased with his intention to leave. His voice, soaked with sarcasm and mockery, broke into triumphant cheers. The administrator tried to stop him, mentioning the tasks for him. Ike stated firmly that he had already left the guild. He was the only one here who could cry, even though he had already cried everything yesterday. Pans grinned and told him that having a couple of quests for him didn't negate the fact that he was still F rank. He could only use the weakest magic, so he didn't even deserve to be treated like that. After all, now he had the courage to act like this. None of them still understood anything. Single assignments paid 50% more, so there was more money to be made from them. But that wasn't for him. The administrator offered him assignments from the feudal lord, the forest guard, and the former guild master. Ike decided to fulfill them as the latter. He asked to read the contents and the reward amount aloud. These 3 assignments were quite troublesome, and no one wanted to take them. For the feudal lord, it was to repair his maid's magic item, for the forest guard to patrol and protect the forest, and for the former guild master to maintain and manage the tavern for a month. And the reward would be 7 small silver coins. After saying that, there was silence. The amount of the reward made Pans laugh. Ike was forced to accept them, even if he couldn't fulfill them. But he had to agree that it was simply humiliating to receive such orders. Now he realized that it was a worthless reward. He's a ranky seeker, and the reward didn't match his rank. Yet these quests would be his last. Just 3 more quests, and Ike would cease to be an adventurer. To begin, he went to the feudal lord to repair his servant's item. He created an ice ball. When he placed it, the magical upgrade was complete. It should have lasted for about a month. All that was left was to apply lighting magic to all the rooms. This place was quite large, so Ike's had a lot of tedious work to do. He reasoned that they needed a portable ball of wind and ice. But what should he do with the materials? He could use a discarded scroll tube. So, he fabricated an object. The light breeze that blew out of it gently touched his face and instantly filled the air with freshness. But then Ike felt something strange in his chest. Viscount Radley had appreciated his idea and had given him until tomorrow to make 100 of them. Thus he had only more work to do. As always, he was only asked for what was beneficial to them. Ike refused. He wasn't going to do it anymore. Even after 5 years, the Viscount was making impossible requests, forcing the lad to work without respite. But he had already decided that he would stop lying to himself. The Viscount thought he could handle such a trifle. Ike declared that he would not change his mind. Radley was boiling with indignation, listening to that tone. His pride was wounded and his ego was hurt. He expected an immediate explanation. If he didn't like the excuse, he would order his execution. He thought threats would be enough to make him obey. The Viscount, out of his magnanimity, might forgive him if he apologized and retracted his statement. Radley hoped that would work. However, Ike no longer wanted to work here. It had cost him a lot of effort to say that. The man froze with his mouth ajar when he heard it. His whole body trembling, he remained motionless. Trying to hide his confusion, he declared that Ike was a talentless wizard and a lowly adventurer, capable of using only elemental magic. He demanded that he double his profits. About to send a personal request, the Viscount realized that this should have been taken care of from the beginning. Ike advised him to ask someone else since he was already retired. His request had been honored, and new requests should be directed to the guild. With that, he left his estate. The Second Forest Guard Patrol. It seemed to the guy that all the personal requests were wearing him out too much. A subcontractor patrolling the forest, his former companions didn't even come in here now. They just handed their business over to others. Ike had been doing this job for 5 years now. In the beginning, he was told to beat all the monsters he could find, and to make it easier, to collect magic stones. But it was getting harder and harder to do as more and more extra work came in. He lurked, noticing a certain object in the forest. There was an orc king wandering in the thicket of the forest. He found Ike's, but the guy was faster, using a fireball. The monster must have thought he was not threatened by those fireballs. The specialty of Ike's magical abilities was their long-lasting effect. His flames would never go out. Victory was his. He felt himself growing stronger. But suddenly his face contorted in pain. Losing his guard, he didn't notice the shadow wolf. Ike couldn't break free as the wolf clung tightly to his leg. Gathering his strength, he activated stun. Thanks to this, the creature loosened its grip. Sensing the danger, the monster retreated. Though Ike had staggered it, it was still able to bite him hard. The wolf fled, but it couldn't escape his lightning bolt. The mana potion made the lad want to eat heavily. He provided a report on today. The monster population had dwindled so much recently that they didn't need an administrator now. Now his work here was done. He gave thanks for his help for all 5 years. Ike didn't know the reason for the drastic decrease in the number of monsters. But what was far more important now was that tonight he would finally sleep in his own bed. He could finally allow himself to dissolve into long-awaited peace. But something had to be done about the pants torn as a result of the bite. Ike tried to mend them with the lucky needle Ryuka had given him, since they were his only pants. But it turned out even worse than it was. He decided to just cut them off and buy new ones as soon as he could. Suddenly it dawned on him that he was running late. The guildmaster's last request was to run the tavern and maintain the premises for a month. His tardiness was taken with aggression. The past guildmaster was a decrepit old man who thought he still had influence. Ike's cleaned the house. The spells he used were supposed to last for a month. The boy realized he was too tired. He had been casting extension spells all day. He was tired of all this elemental magic. The old man wasn't going to write him a fine for being late, but he wasn't going to get a commission either. He was calmly accepting it. The old man laughed and called him lucky. That meant he would simply not complete the assignment this month. He asked him not to be late next month. Ike was amazed that he took this as the norm. He enthusiastically declared that failure was fine. Now, he wouldn't have to redo everything. The past guildmaster, surprised by the reaction, had to put this offense on his report. He realized that it was indeed his mistake. Ike returned to the guild after handling 3 errands. After confirming this, the administrator grimaced and thanked him. Ike waved his hand and smiled broadly. The chains that were restraining him were now broken. It was finally over after all. He despised slavery and considered adventurism a pointless endeavor. Ike spread his arms and shouted that he was free. Thus began his free life. The former E-class adventurer is now unemployed. Ike stretched lazily, feeling the rays of the morning sun on his face. He had been thinking about this for a long time. He had both time and money. He finally felt free. His name was Ike. He was a wizard and could only use elemental magic. Fire that wouldn't go out, ice that wouldn't melt for a month. His magic had an extended duration. He had money because he didn't store before. The guy smelled a pleasant odor. It was coming from the counter with the skewers. For the first time in his life, he was spoiling himself with something tasty. It was time to eat his fill. Viscount Radley still resented the boy for daring to refuse his request. And in this, he received encouragement. He asked the name of the simpleton. Servant Iceman knew it. The Viscount ordered that the lad should not be let out of his possession, and that no one else should hire him. The servant got on with it without delay. Redley was looking forward to it. He could already see how Ike would be begging him for work. This time he would have to learn humility. The servant had already given instructions about Ike. He inquired about a device unknown to him. The Viscount told him that the idea had occurred to him, but that this mage had made a small instrument by combining elemental ice and wind magic in it. Iceman didn't think a novice could come up with such a thing. He noted that the Viscount had a keen eye. Redley had about 5 instruments, one he gave him. He had planned for them to make 200 grand or so, but this guy just ran away. With a puzzled expression on his face, Iceman had something to report about the kitchen. The water supply in the tank stopped, which wasn't surprising. It was created by the same mage after all. The Viscount exhaled unhappily. He replied that he could call another wizard or use the grimoire if it was cheaper. The servant was convinced that it would work out better than Ike could do. Meanwhile, the boy was enjoying a juicy kebab. He couldn't remember the last time he had tasted something as good as this. Getting fired had brought him great joy. He was full, but he knew that if he ate any more, he'd get a stomach ache. His body must be tired after so many years of hard work. He didn't expect that one bite would be enough. Suddenly, the silence was broken by someone's voice asking if he was going to eat yet. The eyes of a guy with cat ears and a fluffy tail glowed with curiosity. But suddenly, feeling embarrassed, he looked away. Ike handed him a skewer with pieces of meat on it. He advised him to eat more slowly, or he might get an upset stomach. The boy wagged his tail happily. He hadn't eaten in 6 months and was grateful to him. Ike's was an orphan too, so he knew what it meant to allow a luxury like meat. The next time they saw each other, he decided to give him something to eat. Life without work was satisfying, but he wasn't satisfied yet. He decided to live the life he wanted. He didn't need anything, but he wanted to splurge. Ike slowly wandered through the store, trying to find something special. Among the things was something he hadn't seen before. The world had changed a lot. He was determined to splurge, but he hadn't bought anything yet. It was all starting to make him dizzy. He needed something that would heal him. Salvation. Suddenly his gaze fell on a stress relief pillow. Ike froze, as if he had seen something incredible. He clutched at the pillow, and the world around him disappeared. He felt heaven in this product. Ike was so happy that he wanted to take her home. He didn't want to let her go. Suddenly, the silence was broken by a female voice that was familiar to him. He froze like a statue, unable to move. She realized it was really him. Ike explained that he had simply decided to watch. The woman thought it was natural for a boy to do so. She mentioned her daughter, who had roughly the same breasts. She would love to have an admirer. Ike wanted her to get it right. He was just testing their quality, but he had touched it and soiled it, so he had no choice but to buy it back. She informed him that it was a sample, so it couldn't be bought. The crafty woman had something in mind. She offered to check out her breasts. The guy pulled away, but that only pleased her. A woman asked for help fixing her water barrel. She asked at the guild, but her request wasn't even considered. Ike had a problem with people with power. They made crazy requests. He couldn't take requests anymore. She certainly liked to be sarcastic, but she knew the measure. Ike would gladly listen to her request. He agreed. The woman was going to send the guild application forms later. The boy remembered something important. He regretfully admitted that he couldn't. Ike was no longer adventurous and decided not to work anymore. Meanwhile, at the Viscount's residence, Aceman was silent, his gaze directed to one point. He was trying to figure out the reason why the jug broke. He used magic, as it was said. When the servant asked the A-class wizard to repeat the same process, he didn't ask him to break the jug with that ball, he only wanted him to fix the barrel. In response, the magician, eyes bulging, said that no such magic existed. Iceman didn't think Ike's magic was so special, but now he couldn't imagine life without his handy jug. He decided to bring another barrel of water from the other room for them to take a break. The lights went out, which meant they still had some work to do. The surprising thing was that Ike was in charge of that as well. Now the butler's torment began. Ike repeated his refusal, but the woman wasn't going to listen to him. He mustered up the courage to say no. Then she decided to give him a slime pillow as a thank you. In hindsight, he thought he could buy it himself. Then he found out that its price was 5 silver coins. Ike was torn between two opposing opinions. The woman added that she would let him use the bathroom. The boy imagined that would be problematic. She continued that it was a very popular item and in high demand. She would take it for herself if they weren't friends. Ike realized that if he refused, he would definitely be taken. The lust to get it kept him on his toes. He figured it wasn't a job for a friend and for a pillow. She asked so insistently that he couldn't refuse. The woman blurted out a smile, thinking he had decided to become her son-in-law. Her daughter loved him too. She offered to make a child for her as well. In the end, Ike accepted the job. He was glad she was happy, and the slime belonged to him now. Using elemental magic, he fulfilled her request. It should have been enough for a year, but she would have liked longer. Come to think of it, it was possible. But was it a bad thing that Ike's had been trained this way? He wouldn't be able to do it twice. The door slowly opened. A girl whose face glowed with happiness peered through the crack. The woman announced that thanks to Ike's, they could use the bathroom. Lena was very fond of him, for which he tapped her lightly on the head. He disliked her upbringing immensely. He asked Lena not to say that until she was older. But the girl thought she was already big enough. She hinted at the size of her breasts, but that wasn't what he meant. He threatened that if she said that in public, she would be eaten by an orc. Ike's friend offered to work his magic for her if he was no longer adventurous. The thought of working pierced him like an arrow. Ike's refused her offer. He repeated about his decision not to work. The woman noticed his tension and simply hugged him. She decided not to offer such a thing again. Lena joined them as well. Their embrace merged into one, filled with support and understanding. They warmed his heart. They both made him feel better. Ike thanked them for today. Being his friends, they asked to ask for help if he had a problem. Suddenly he asked if they knew about the magic ball. Before, it was considered an expensive magical tool used by nobles. Ike called it a ball that doesn't melt for a year. He gave it to them as a bonus. Both of them expressed immense gratitude in their voices. The girl, surrounded by soft toys, wondered why Ike didn't show up. Ike fell asleep on his new pillow, which was so soft and pliable that he couldn't get out of its embrace. It was doubly pleasant to sleep now. He hadn't realized that a pillow could make such a big difference in the quality of sleep. It was possible to rest more than 3 hours a night. He realized how right his decision to leave the Adventurers Guild had been. A feeling of hunger made him rise. Ike visited the restaurant he regularly visited. Here a noxious but cooked slime meal was waiting for him, costing only 10 silver coins. The waitress demanded money from him. But he froze in bewilderment. And then she realized that he was going to eat here today. The girl was jubilant that Ike had finally decided to eat real food in a restaurant. She provided the menu. The boy ran his eyes over it. He asked for any recommendations. She knew dishes that could surprise him. His order was ready. Ike took a spoon and brought it to his mouth. His eyes filled with tears, but not from pain. He felt warmth. The waitress, watching his reaction, drew her own conclusions. Despite its outward simplicity, acid and mana were a perfect match. Ike liked the flavor very much. It made him feel good to give up bad food. He admitted that it was delicious. The girl asked if he had any free time. She was worried about him, for she considered herself his sister, but he replied that he wasn't. Ike announced his resignation. She, willing to help, offered to work here together. The guy asked not to take it personally, but he didn't want to labor anymore. He wanted to take a walk and distract himself before going home. Suddenly he felt a strong pain and couldn't stand on his feet. The worried girl rushed over to him. Ike's eyes widened with surprise. The girl smelled pleasant. He apologized for scaring her. His buff spell had run out. It was happening all the time. The guy used support. The support activated elemental magic and amplified it. It was his original doping magic, though the effects were added one at a time. Very quickly, Ike recovered and was now full of strength. Since becoming a scientist, she had developed abilities that made her tired quickly. The girl believed that she was too worried about him. So he decided to cast a spell on her to thank her for saving him. She wouldn't be tired for a month. She awkwardly thanked him. The girl felt a little better. Ike activated the support. She felt an endless surge of energy. The guy's mysterious personality became intimidating. He explained that he could only use elemental magic for beginners. The girl realized that she could do anything now. A powerful engine awoke inside her. Thanking him, she disappeared to complete her research. She had a whole month to spare, but she had overreacted. He had only used the spell on people in the guild before. The Adventurers Guild received another large prey. The guild's most powerful group, Panta, had taken advantage of the bonus time. To be an adventurer, one must be a wise person. He placed a sack on the table. The jewelry was gathered into it. The administrator found that they had obtained the giant Nami stone from the Orc King Ogre, as well as a shadow wolf and an orc. She couldn't imagine how they had managed to defeat so many monsters. Panta kept it a secret. They had simply taken a magic stone from a demon killed by one of the foresters. It was all thanks to an unknown, incredibly strong guy. They made a lot of money this month, so Pants offered to have a drink. He was turned down. The guys weren't feeling well either. He had been feeling tired lately too. He didn't have that feeling of boundless power. They were absolutely right. They needed that wizard guy. The receptionist was contacted for that. She was asked to bring Ike's back, and they would approve his F rank. They used the buffs that Ike's had put on them to stay on their feet longer. They didn't realize that they could have just rested. On the other hand, these were their strongest adventurers. The ones who were getting the biggest bounty and killing the strongest demons needed Ike's to continue their activities. This was to be the last glorious day of their group. After getting full, Ike's could rest in his room. It was very noisy in front of the inn. He decided to avoid trouble as he suddenly heard about a live bear at the little girl's place. That made him stop. Ryuka was waiting for him outside the inn, cradling the teddy bear to her chest. When he finally appeared, her displeasure only increased. She had come to visit him, but she couldn't even enter the inn because of the people staring at her. Ike's thought she couldn't take it anymore, so she hid here. He knew she was shy, but how long had she been here? Ryuka was a mage puppeteer. At the Silent Cat Cafe, she had inquired about the reason he had canceled the magic contract. Without it, they were in real trouble. Ryuka ran a sewing factory with living dolls. Ike's announced that he had quit his job. She assumed he was leaving and became despondent. But that wasn't in his plans. They looked at each other in silence. At that moment, she felt uncomfortable. Ike's activated the helper skill on the teddy bear. The crazy bear apologized for hitting him before and expressed his gratitude. For a long time, Ike's baffled this talking bear with his abilities. Perhaps because he had a unit added to his intelligence, one day he spoke. But it seems that when the effects of the buff were off, he loses that ability. Ryuka admitted that without Ike's, Crazy Bear loses his intelligence, so she needed him here. The bear relied on him. The guy then told her about his dismissal from the guild. Ryuka was very angry with him. It was like she was different. Even said she would beat the crap out of him. Ike's just took it as a sign. They walked out of the cafe into the street. Ike's offered to walk her home while he was still here. At the same time, he admired her beauty like a doll's. The guild administrator was already waiting for him at the entrance of the inn, waving her hand with a slight smile. Ike's frowned and cast a disgruntled look. He had two beautiful girls in his room in broad daylight. The administrator had come to him with good news. Ike's had been approved for AC rank, and next month promised AB. He exhaled tensely. He repeated that he was no longer an adventurer, and noticed that he was a grade F. The administrator explained that the guild had given him trials, so he could rise above his adversities. From now on, the guild will reject requests from the poor. They would focus on requests with high stakes. And besides, she was always happy to see him in the guild, hinting that he might ask her out. Ix didn't want to think about it. He didn't have time for that. The boy looked at Ryuka worriedly. He was relieved when he realized that everything was all right. Ix realized that he had changed. He was about to answer her something important and had already gotten some air in his lungs. But the crazy bear beat him to it. He told her that she could say anything she wanted, but Ix wouldn't listen to her. The guy felt a stone fall from his soul. The administrator couldn't believe her ears when the toy spoke. The bear stated that he wasn't so easily led by the word test. Mages started at level C because they were very rare. Thus, the guild was simply skimming commission money from their affiliates and using it for their expenses. Both he and she were stunned by the plush creature's statement. Ix found it hard to believe that he was being taught by a bear with an intelligence of 1. The bear concluded that that was the whole point, and it didn't make sense. First of all, the guild had to apologize for their behavior, and there was no arguing with that. After escorting the administrator out, Ix exhaled and said that he was finally home. Ryuka remarked that he should thank the crazy bear. When the guy thanked him, Kumakichi called out his name. Ix guessed that it was Ryuka who told Kumakichi, the creature, about the guild's work. She had his back, and that was comforting. Like Ryuka and Kumakichi, Lena and her aunt, the people in the restaurant, he had a lot of good friends. The receptionist told the reason why Ix had rejected the offer. The guild master had spoken negatively of him. She delivered another message of mission failure. And none of the guild members showed up. The guild's doomsday was almost upon us. Kumakichi, nice and fluffy, was already tired of fighting off the administrators. Ix asked Ryuka if her workshop was up and running. It was a sewing workshop using her automatic dolls. The efficiency was vastly different with and without his magic. He was worried if she would be able to turn the work in on time. He didn't like the look on her face. She had heard what he had said earlier. If he made them work, he would look like a villain. As for the bear, he was completely different. Ryuka offered a reminiscence. She knew he was useful, but her workshop could only cope if they cut back on production. The world would go on without him, so he didn't have to accept her sense of responsibility for his. She didn't want anyone else to suffer because of her. She suggested he get some rest. The girl headed for the exit, hoping he understood what she meant. Ix decided to walk her home. The guild administrator reported Ix's dismissal the other day. The former guild master was not happy about being the last to know. And all this after the trouble he had caused him. He even ruined all the exquisite dishes in his restaurant. Maybe Ix will put him in charge of getting fired too. But the commission clearly stipulated the responsibility for damages. If something serious happened, the former guild master would be held responsible to the end, no matter what. He demanded a reread. And then the administrator noticed something. This request was considered a rejected request. That meant it was invalid, and the guild had nothing to do with it. He remembered that he had been a bit stingy that time. The former guild master was worried that Ix had no one to replace him, and they had just done a remodel and run up debts. The girl thanked him for his hard work. The adventurers returned from a mission they had failed. The enemy turned out to be stronger than usual. It is more difficult than it was a few days ago. This was the 9th failure this month. There had been that many in all of last year, and now only in 3 days. Those who didn't know failure spoke of a strong enemy, which seemed impossible. The guild master was extremely dissatisfied with the fact that the guys had given up ground. The adventurers proposed a special meeting. Recently, they had been in a bad mood. In this adventurer guild, the strongest in this guild are the zombie team. This was a rumor. In fact, being strong is easy. Once you experience it, you'll be hooked. Above all, the guild master wanted the adventurers to have a high level of awareness and the ability to think for themselves on a daily basis. He hoped they heard him. That's all he had to say. He urged the adventurers to take their equipment and set out for adventure. With a powerful impetus, they rushed on their way. The secret was revealed after an extraordinary meeting in the tavern. The request for reinforcement was addressed to Ares. She wanted to talk about the guild master. She thought that outside of battle, reinforcement was meaningless. But who knew it was effective as it was? The girl, being a newbie, was told to just do as she was told. She asked everyone to get in line. The first was the S rank attacking Mara. She had 11 magic abilities. Ares applied a buff on her. The attacker's well-being improved. She expressed her gratitude to her. Mara was a powerful enchantress who applied a number of very powerful elemental spells while using little mana. However, there were many willing participants. Ares had a tough job ahead of her. Very quickly, the adventurers' buffs ran out. No one could understand what was happening. Everyone was outraged at how weak she was as a sorceress. The girl didn't understand their anger. The duration of the buff was only 10 minutes. Mara noticed that Ix's buffs lasted for a month. Without enhancement magic, she was having trouble. The price of being super efficient was her magic power dropping to the level of a child. Without buffs, she couldn't fire a series of shots without reloading. She had no choice but to restore her magic power with potions. Without reinforcements, no one could do their job like they used to. Ares explained that it was impossible. She had specialized in magic all her life, and she was sure of it. Reinforcements lasted for 10 minutes at most. That meant that the adventurers could no longer return to their previous level. Even if they called another buff master, they would still only have 10 minutes. The realization arose that Ix was actually awesome. Mara stated to the guild master that they needed Ix. He kicked him out and, she hoped, would bring him back. She found support from the other adventurers. The administrator wasn't left out either. The guy who was with him said the guild master should apologize. The man stood at a loss, not knowing in front of whom. Then she grabbed him by the collar. She demanded to go and apologize to Ix. Meanwhile, the guy was recognized on the street as an amplifying wizard. The cook asked for the sharpness of his knives to be restored. They numbered about 10. But Ix brushed it off with the fact that he wasn't accepting any more errands. The cook had to ask the sharpening company to do it, though it would cost more. Ix used to have an absolute percentage of orders. Now he was turning them all down. The world would go on without him. Ryuka was right. Even if he said no, they would always ask someone else. Suddenly, someone rudely called out to him. He had no idea what this time this city's signature zombie team would say. For some unknown reason, he was shoved. Pans demanded to be more polite to his former co-workers. He didn't like his defiant look. The old Ix might have been a bit unemotional. That was something to ponder over. He might not have said anything in response. But he demanded an apology. The offender had not expected this, and was trying to make sense of what was happening. Ix repeated his demands. Pans thought he was mad. He threatened that he could easily massacre him. Draw his sword and threaten with magic. That's the adventurer's way. But Ix wouldn't let him. He activated an ice charm. It helped stop the enemy. That sword froze for a month. The guys chimed in that it's a felony, and it's a lot of money for an aspiring wizard. but it was Pans who attacked him. Ike's tried not to hurt him, and didn't realize how far he had to go to get them to back off. He imagined the consequences if he tried any harder. The guys with the cutlery stood up for him. They were the restaurant manager and the waitress. Pans was not given the opportunity to speak. The manager advised me to do something before saying anything to Ike's. Paid last month's bill. He said he was 3 days late. Pans dissuaded Ike's that he could get away with making an enemy of him. But the lad knew that these two were better than most adventurers. He used an enhancement that increased the sharpness of the cutlery. Not only did the guy's eyes flash with advantage, but also a thirst for revenge. They were ready to fight. Pans asked not to take all the jokes seriously. He promised to be sure to pay, only later. Before they left, Ike's demanded that he apologize to him. Pans, gritting his teeth, squeezed out his regrets. Ike's friends couldn't believe he had made them apologize. He himself didn't understand how it had even happened. The guys were proud of him. He was grateful to the two of them. They hoped that he, being their regular customer, would visit them today. They asked what they should make. Ike's decided to have Hanja's specialty. Ponsu had to humble himself. If Ike's crossed them, they'd have to take a few more guys and beat them up. They finally got the report on the forest guard's murder. The news cheered him up considerably. It was their bonus time. The team traveled to the Devil Forest where something strange had happened. Puzzled, they looked around. They desperately searched for the magic stone, which did not appear on the ground. Suddenly, from the thick shadows of the forest, a sinister look stared back at them. Pants's heart skipped a beat as the shadow wolf appeared before them. A piercing scream came from the forest. They didn't think the demon was still alive. Dwarf stumbled and fell, which the leader noticed. He held out his hand and begged for help, looking at them pleadingly. But Pans, gripped by fear, didn't even think to listen to him. After that, he disappeared. Pants made his way to a safe place. He didn't understand why the demons were still alive after the report of their extermination. The forest ranger's report was false. Ike's had been the only one doing it so far, and they were taking credit for it, and now they couldn't pull it off. They were counting on bonus time. Ike's was forbidden from lifting the demon magic stones, so they remained untouched. The newcomers were completely unaware of this, however. Elfman was a traitor. After that day, the young heroes of the guild, the zombies, were disgraced. Pants lost his wallet with all his money. The guy swiftly dashed through the gun store. The salesman greeted him lazily. Right now, he had a good one for him. The customer had finally given up on him. But Pans declared he wasn't buying. He pawned his sword. Even though he was proud of the incendiary, he asked for an appraisal. He wouldn't be able to keep it anyway. This store didn't care if he was ready to use it or not. They would give him the right amount of money. The vendor offered 1 gold coin, which was cheap, but Pans agreed. He was going to come back for it next month and strictly ordered no one to touch it. He knew he would definitely return his precious magic sword next month at bonus time. All he could think about was the bonus time that would never come. But that day, he never came again. Viscount Radley's estate. After the ball, he was in a great mood. It was about the idea he had asked that inferior magician for, a device that created a cool wind. The princess was so interested in the ice and wind magic tube that she was thrilled when he gave it to her. It would give him a good reputation. Butler noted one problem. Ike's is no longer an adventurer. The Viscount ordered a visit to his home. He was sure that this unemployed and impoverished part-time mage would weep for joy when he learned of the opportunity to work for him. Iceman would look into it. As his first assignment, he made 200 of these same tubes. Redley could see that he had learned something from him. However, things were not as flawless as they seemed. Aceman had managed it, but the extinguished magic light could only be recreated by Ike's. It was giving him a headache. A girl approached him. According to the head maid, the ice in the largest 7th compartment had melted. She would like a new one and inquired when it would be ready. The butler ordered the contents of the 7th ice compartment to be destroyed. The girl offered to call the master for a replacement. He asked to keep it a secret. Apparently, Ike's magic was special. Not only the ice that wouldn't melt, but the light that wouldn't go out in the room. No one else was able to recreate the jugs that had water constantly flowing out of them. She didn't know he was so powerful. She thought he had entry-level magic. Iceman explained that the magic Ike's was using was definitely entry-level magic, but its effects were unusually long-lasting. The maid asked him to invite Ike's as soon as possible, otherwise the family's prestige would fall. The butler was going to lure him with money and give him a seat at the table. A plush toy was shoved into the mailbox opening. Ike stared at it in bewilderment. He didn't know what to do in a situation like this. There was no need to be surprised here. He pulled out the rabbit soldier. Ryuki's house was full of plush bunnies from the sewing shop. They were all the same, but apparently Ryuka knew how to tell them apart. She said she could do without his enhancements, and he sensed something amiss, so he decided to stop by her workshop. Ike yanked on the string of the doorbell. He let her know he was here to play. She was shy, so she never went out to ring the bell. Ike ended up using the key she gave him. He apologized for bothering her. Ryuka was a mage, just like him. Magic wasn't reasonable. More precisely, it originated from the land of eternal emptiness and expressed itself through its zones. For example, in the hollow plane, fire rages eternally. In the ice valley, different variations of coldness. Magic connected their world to the land of the void and expressed the normality of its inhabitants. The magic element was like a tunnel between their worlds. To gain great power, the magician would open it in his body. He would make a pact with one of the inhabitants of the void, giving something in return to open a hole in his body. In this way, he was putting the very idea into the body. By nature, such powers had little to do with what was desired. Ryuka had received the blessing of being a puppeteer, and in return, when the void took everything from her, she received loneliness. The sacrifice she made was an interpersonal phobia. He thought Ryuka had always wanted a friend. This guy became one, but he was also jealous. He took away her courage so others couldn't get close to her. When Ike first heard Ryuka's voice, that was the same day he spoke. That's when they became friends. A plush hare was carrying balls of yarn. He fell down because he was walking with the yarn. A girl's head peeked out of the room. The hair on her head was slightly disheveled, and there was nervousness in her eyes. Ike waved at her and said he had come to play. She flinched sharply and grabbed her head. The boy asked if he came too early. Ryuka replied that he came on time, but he should have at least rang the bell. Ike rang the bell, but from the mess, Ryuka didn't seem to hear him. She waved it away, not wanting to answer. It was then that he ventured to look into the room. What he saw surprised him. A rabbit lay in the middle of the room, buried under the fallen material. The girl felt terribly ashamed. She mustered up the resolve to explain herself. Ryuka was afraid to ask for his help, but she couldn't do without him. Ike had only been here for a few minutes, and already these rabbits were falling apart. He didn't know it would be this bad when the intelligence ran out. He activated the amplification. The rabbit gained the strength to get out on its own. He ran up to Ike's and expressed his gratitude. The guy happily concluded that the mission was accomplished. Ryuka thought that this was the end of it. The bear, whose soft paws encircled his leg, thought the same. Ike's was beginning to feel like a hero in this situation. He told her to count it as an order. He was the only one who could help them, and they could rely on him. The reinforcement was used on the rest of the rabbits. There was one last room left. The guy turned to everyone. There were too many rabbits. He didn't think he wanted to work here. Ike's decided he had no choice. Ryuka suddenly wrapped her arms around him from behind. He turned around, startled by her swiftness. Ike's didn't even know when she knew how to stop. The girl plopped him down on the floor and sat on top of him. She was going to stop this. These puppets were uncontrollable when they weren't doing a difficult job. He could work when he wanted to. This wasn't what he thought it would be like, and she wanted him to rest. Ike's apologized. He realized he was a little tense. The tea spilled over the cups, filling the room with a pleasant aroma. Ike's was relieved. Ryuka prepared a large silver coin for him as a reward. He thanked her with a sense of unease. The girl admitted that it was hard to lower his standard of living after it had increased, having to do difficult things like before. She added that his magic was too convenient. She felt bad that Ike's wasn't listening to her. She grabbed a treat off the table and threw it at him. He caught it deftly with his lips. Ryuka loved it. As an extra reward, she threw another one. But he deliberately didn't catch it. His hand rested on the table. Ike's held out the treat to her, asking her not to play with her food. He shoved the sweet into her mouth. Ryuka didn't bother to resist. The report to the head chamberlain was made. The man carefully read Ike's card from the guild. The information was so ridiculous that it made him question the validity of the information. No magic stone could be seen in the magic instrument given to the princess at the evening reception, but a cool breeze kept blowing from within. He wondered if it was possible that it was some sort of hidden weapon. Ike's desire not to work was also suspicious. The old man was at a loss to guess what was going on in his head. The princess felt that bothering her grandfather would solve nothing. She suggested that she go and ask him. The guild administrator was hopeful. Ike's is at her place. She hadn't been able to convince him to return as an adventurer the other day. She believed that if the guild master apologized to Ike's, he would definitely forgive them. The guild master realized that Ike's had caused him a lot of trouble, but he agreed to go along with the humiliation. It was reported to him that he had quit because of the Viscount's unreasonable demands. Aceman was willing to give him 10 gold pieces for the job. He asked to be told that he was offering an exclusive contract with higher pay. The guild master was surprised at such a small sum of money. He was sure the guy wouldn't come back with such an attitude. Then, the butler offered 100 gold and an exclusive contract. It was more than he had expected. The guild master reasoned that Ike's might not be convinced because he was mistrustful. He could help them for only 5 gold coins. Aikesman accepted his terms, in turn expecting success. The guild master greedily anticipated the gold coins filling his coffers. With that confidence, he came to Ike's. The boy recalled his dismissal, so unwilling to speak to him. Trying to keep a strained smile, the guild master hated this mage. He decided to get over it for now. He was in a great mood now, as he had spent almost the entire amount to buy a new house. Now he wasn't even worried about the fate of the guy in the guild. He could even give him an A rank. Though of course, he would do it with his heart. When Ike's was E rank, he made a good amount of money on the side with it. He had come all the way to visit him. and offered to let him in and talk things over without disturbing anyone. Ix asked not to be disturbed. The guild master didn't immediately realize what he had been told. The boy had stated his reluctance. He thought they should leave. The administrator tried to rectify the situation by saying that the guild master was here to apologize. He had, as requested, expressed his regret. This gesture came as a surprise to him. Ix was surprised that these people took Kuma's words seriously. Now that the deed was done, he asked them to leave. The guild master continued to stand his ground, begging to return to the guild where he would receive an A grade. The administrator hoped this would convince him to come back. Ix wasn't going to change his mind and asked to leave again. To him, a place in the guild was nothing more than a thankless task. With that, he slammed the door shut, leaving them with his resentment. The boy was proud of himself. Ix was feeling better. They continued to plead with him outside the door. When he opened it again, they were glad he had changed his mind. However, the man declared that if they did not leave now, he would leave the city. The guild master, frightened, decided to give up and retreat. Frustration and anger raged within him, and he left the area in a hurry. Ix wished them luck on the job. He was about to tell Ryuka about what he had just done. The administrator couldn't keep up with the guild master. She wanted to know why they had backed off so easily. If Ix went to another city, he would have to work. This could have been their chance. The guild master decided they couldn't let him leave just because of them. With that, she agreed. That this guy would go to another city was impossible. The guild master had already spent the bounty. If Ix leaves, the Viscount will punish him. Looks like he'll have to use a secret plan. From now on, he took full responsibility, and she had to convince the adventurers to wait 3 days. The charm for 3 days would be used to do so. The guild master decided that if she couldn't convince him, she would force him to obey. An imperfect wizard, who could only use elemental magic, was challenging him. He wondered if it was finally time to use it. Using it on him was a waste, but he saw no other option. The bondage ring reduced the wearer's abilities by 1 level, absorbed psychic energy, and made him receive telepathic messages. This magical tool was hidden by the guild master in a secret room of the warehouse. The guild master was going to take revenge for going against him. But suddenly the clause about dropping a level 1 from a novice embarrassed him. The guy was a wimp. The ring didn't allow for large amounts of magic. Could it work on someone like Ix? At the very least, he should have learned the intermediate level. The guild master had laughed at him so many times and never thought he would suffer for it. He could have ended up in the mine. He didn't even have enough money to escape, and he had also bought this mansion. But suddenly, he remembered that they had money. It was the guild's deposit. He was sure that the adventurers wouldn't blame him if they knew the whole situation. The guild master never thought that he would become a fugitive because of Ix. It was a bit dangerous, but would have to go through the demon forest. He would have to overcome this dark forest to make a fresh start in life. Here was a new defense he had heard about. It was a simple, crude piece of iron wire. He hadn't realized the city was under such protection. It was disappointing. The wire looked like ordinary wire, so he, figuring it wouldn't work on him, was just going to climb over. He found himself stunned by Ix's deafening blasts. Like all goblins ever trapped, the guild master was now unconscious. He woke up already behind bars. Ace Man had been waiting for him to awaken, guessing that he had attempted to escape. That meant he had failed the Viscount's assignment. The guild master thought the electric fence was his work. It turned out to be so, for the forest guards were under the protection of the Viscount. The forest guards were also doing their duties well. In fact, they had to do all the hard work of erecting the fences, including Ike's. It was hard to believe, but it was true. The barrier was just a title. It was just an elemental electric stun that lasted for an unusually long time. As for what to do next, Butler would send him to work in the mines that produced the money that the guildmaster loved so much. Since he had 5 coins left, he would spend exactly 5 years in the mines. The guildmaster pleaded with him in hopes that he would come to his senses. He thought of the guild's gold. Iceman reported that the guild had found it with him. They returned the money and left him where he was. But they had found something else. He thought it was important. The butler let him keep it, considering he'd be wearing it on his finger. The man demanded to get away from him. But Iceman decided to restore justice. He ordered him to take him to the mines and set him up there. He went out of his way to wish him luck in this endeavor. The guild master felt the heat leave his body. Ike's was caught outside. The butler wanted to speak to him. Iceman heard that the man had left the guild, but he had received an advance for the work and now he couldn't refuse them, so he was forced to do the work. Ike's didn't understand anything that was said. In any case, the amount of money could not affect his unwavering unwillingness to work for the Viscount. The butler was at a loss to know what to answer. Ike's hurried to remove himself. Iceman watched him in silence with his hands clenched into fists. He realized that the guild master had tricked him. He couldn't believe that he hadn't given Ike's any of the 105 gold coins he had given him, let alone the fact that he was the middleman. He was going to get revenge for his brazen deception. The guild master was weighed down by his ring preventing him from working. He would have to endure 5 years of this hell. He believed he would, but he didn't yet know that his sentence had been extended for 100 years after Iceman had learned of his deception. The Viscount inquired about their young mage's business. The day of the meeting with the princess was approaching. 200 tubes had to be made as a gift as soon as possible. He offered to send for someone else, but Iceman was told that only Ike's was capable of that. A man present offered to kidnap him. Ryuka, the king of the slums, approached the Viscount while he was away. Redley pondered the idea. The butler tried to dissuade him. Ryuka advised to give him a room in the basement and to treat him politely. He was sure to change his mind. The Viscount liked his idea. However, he realized that kidnapping was bad form. Then they would use a decoy that should work. It would be unprofitable to kidnap Ike's, so he would come to them on his own. Redley told them to cunningly trap the young man with the help of the girl. Ryuka was left alone with his thoughts. The decision to use the bait extremely stressed him out. Their city was diverse. Each underworld organization had its own specialty. Theirs was violence. They didn't have beautiful women. He decided to hold a gathering. They included a sick child, an old woman, a pregnant woman, a wildling, and a purebred dog. Ryuka panicked when he made sure there was no one in their ranks who could handle the task. He didn't even know this guy's preference, and there was already no one to take for a trap. He was pulled from his thoughts by a voice. A girl was heading towards him. She knew she would have to deal with everything alone again. Everyone was used to relying on her. She agreed to help just this once. The girl reminded him that Ryuka was the only one she loved. He instantly perked up, for he knew he could rely on his girlfriend. She was a very good one. That was the only reason he had fallen in love with her. But he doubted that her attractiveness would be enough. Ryuka decided to flip a coin. If it was an eagle, he would choose her, and if it was a tails, he would ask someone else. The coin seemed about to land in his palm, but at the last moment it flew through her. It hit the ground with a thud. The mood collapsed like a house of cards. But suddenly the guy picked up the coin and handed it to his boss. Ryuka realized that the solution to the problem had found him on its own. The boss made him dress up as a girl. The guy thought it was wrong and was sure the bait wouldn't work. Most of all, the girl didn't like it because she lent him her favorite outfit because the boss, to whom the guy answered directly, said so. Their mate didn't immediately recognize him in this look, mistaking him for the girl. That meant their cunning plan was working. They had located the target. The three lurked, watching him. Walking through the streets of the city, Ike's looked carefree. But next to him was a beautiful girl. She looked like a demon queen and like she was out of place. The guy decided they weren't going to make it and suggested they go home. But the others believed they had the upper hand, even if defeat awaited them. Ryuka's girlfriend was willing to do anything for him. Ike's managed to spot the three that had been watching them earlier. Now they were coming this way. He also saw that Ryuka was scared, which meant he had to protect her. Turning around, he found himself face to face with the unknown men. The boy demanded an explanation of their intentions. The pursuers offered to have fun. The guys' faces reflected bewilderment. Suddenly one of them could not stand it and became indignant. The bear considered it a violation of personal space during the walk, and one of them was a man. The guy, disguised as a girl, realized that they had been figured out, while his companion was shocked by the bear's ability to talk. Ike's needed to make things clear. They confessed that they wanted to bait him, and it would have worked if it weren't for this girl. They offered to pretend he'd fallen for it and go to the Viscount. He didn't treat his subordinates badly, and it was better than being kidnapped. Besides, they wanted to save their sister's face. Ike's, as before, gave a proud refusal. The failure of the mission in particular was resented by the girl. If everyone had acted according to plan, it would have worked. They left. As if nothing had happened, Kumakichi offered to continue shopping. The pursuers were surprisingly straightforward and simple. Ike's had never known of such a trap before. His friends were proud of him. Ryuka never thought anyone could resist such a beauty. Almost all the old boys were gone, and he had no idea what to do next. Ike's kept him on his toes. A guy with cat ears reacted to the name. Ryuka realized this was his chance to get Ike's to the Viscount. He asked what the guy wanted in return. The guy asked for cold medicine. Suddenly a realization came to Ryuka. He remembered the child who had just left in view of the worsening cold. When the boy heard the agreement to get the medicine, his eyes flashed with sincere joy. Ryuka stared at him in silence. He couldn't believe he was using the child for work. He decided to end it. His girlfriend believed he had found a solution after all. Ryuka wasn't going to take the bait anymore. He didn't want to see her like that again. The boy managed to bring Ike's to the Viscount's house. The butler assumed he decided to go back to work. Ike spoke his anger directly. He resented the fact that they were using the child as bait. Butler was shocked by such a statement, as if he himself didn't know what it was all about. He thought it was a mistake, but Ike was convinced he was trying to avoid responsibility in the face of facts. And he'd heard they'd made a deal for medicine for a sick child. Iceman himself didn't understand why Ryuka was doing this to the children. The boy said he would do anything for his sick friend. Ike despised them for using a child like that. Seeing the mage, the Viscount couldn't help himself and rushed towards him with a cry of joy. Redley knew that Ike would take the bait. He demanded to get to work. Ike resolved never to listen to this guy. Not under any circumstances. Seeing the cold determination in his eyes, the Viscount tensed. Ike's declared that he would never forgive him for the way he acted towards the children. He decided to take the purchase of the medicine for the child's friend on himself. It was a complete victory for Ike's. Rumors spread that the Viscount was using the children for his dark deeds. His reputation hit rock bottom. The princess coordinates were a villa in Forest End. She was going to pay a visit to the great magician. The chamberlain was stunned when Princess Lula went to Ike's herself. The guards missed her. She was gone before they could stop her. He wondered if it had been a mistake to consult with the princess. The third Princess Lula was 12 years old, not as old as her sisters. She had an innocent, intelligent face, and one time she brought something unusual with her. It was a cold and very light breeze from the Viscount. She showed it to her grandfather. He did a search. The ability detected the first level of danger. Even so, the tube gave him a strange feeling. He supposed there was nothing in the city that could attract her attention, but Viscount Radley's cylinder would keep him awake. The chamberlain asked her for a second one, and she lent it with a request not to break it. It was for her sister. There was a first-class technician, Herman, working in the Royal Laboratory of Magical Technology, to whom the chamberlain showed a new type of magical tool. This mysterious item was handed directly to the princess by Viscount Radley at a dinner party, breaking the rules. They had to be on their guard. Herman thought, shouldn't an aristocrat know about this? He believed that there was something more important. The object was terribly light. The chamberlain wouldn't let him take it apart, or the princess would be furious. Herman guessed there were small ice cubes and a slit through which the wind passed. He wondered if the formula was written directly on the magic stone carved into the shape of a cylinder, as well as a line of demonic tools and special relics. But an important detail was missing here. He was overcome with indignation. The chamberlain assumed it was the engraving. He recognized that it was not a very complimentary activity, but he had done engravings before. That wasn't what the technician had meant. There was no formula. In fact, there wasn't even a magic power source stone. These were not the magical tools of the world as they knew it. This was the structure that held the ice ball and the winds of elemental magic. He couldn't believe that such a magical device existed. If it really was the work of Ike's, they didn't know how to contact him. The princess guessed that it was long-playing entry-level magic, and it was the great mage himself. The chamberlain explained that it wasn't exactly like that. It was just that someone was using strong magic very routinely. She decided that someone should then ask him to do more. He agreed with her. Lula declared her intention to set out on her journey. She was in a hurry to make a surprise tube for her sister. It was possible that there was a great mage behind the Viscount, and having studied his biography, he would like to bring him to their side, if possible. And in the course of the investigation, the whole story of the young man's desire not to work came to light. The princess had heard it all, and when he asked what the man who did not want to work wished for, she said that he was the only one who could tell him so. The chamberlain realized that he had almost missed the obvious. Then perhaps they could arrange a meeting with Ike's in the near future. The princess acted too quickly and went to him alone. Lula changed her clothes at the villa. Very quickly, she found the person she was going to do this for. Ike's was looking for a child to whom he could give the kebab skewer. The princess volunteered to help him with his search. She took off from her seat and led him with determination. Lula led him to the sleeping cat. She thought he liked kebabs. The animal lazily opened one eye, looked at the treat, and went back to its sweet sleep. They looked at each other and realized that he was not fond of kebabs. At this point, Ike's asked her what she was doing here. Their conversation was interrupted by the appearance of the guy he was looking for. Ike held out a kebab to Nitra, but he asked for another one. He had just finished some medicine for Rai. Nitra, taking a bite and savoring it, bid him a warm farewell. It pained Ike to look at him. Even though he was unemployed and could no longer afford such purchases, he paid homage to the guy, and he was sure she thought he was suspicious. He hoped she'd find who she wanted. But the girl was looking for him, the great wizard Ike. The guy corrected that he was a wizard called Defective. She apologized. He had the same name as the great wizard she was looking for. The one who had done this was named Ike. She wished she could ask him to make one for her. Ike remembered that it had been made at the request of the Viscount. He asked to be allowed to take a closer look. The boy was convinced that it was his design. He replied that he could make one. Lula asked to make 2 of them. The girl realized that in front of her was the real Ike, the great wizard. At that moment her joy burst out with incredible force. The guy did not consider himself as such, for he could only use elemental magic. But it was best not to crush other people's dreams. He wondered if she noticed. Ike proceeded to fulfill her request. He waved his hand, and the air was filled with magic, which was mesmerizing. The guy asked to keep the fact that he was a mage a secret. Lula thanked him sincerely, and they exchanged warm smiles. Ike turned out to be a great wizard today. It was funny, but it wasn't that bad. He asked not to tell that to that beastman guy either. The Chamberlain was furious that the princess had disappeared, leaving them in the dark. They were worried. Instead of answering, she held out a gift to him. The old man saw that it was not the pipe she had originally had. She informed him that she had asked Ike to make them for her on loan, which did not please him. The royal family couldn't stay in debt. One had to be sure to pay for it. Ike had 2 problems. The first was that outside the inn he was often contacted by suspicious people in expensive clothes. He had been invited to a dinner party in gratitude for saving a certain nobleman. Still, he declined. The second problem was that he would soon run out of money. Every day he ate at the restaurant and couldn't go back to eating slime like before. Yesterday, he even ordered juice after his meal. All he had was a little bit of money and a full set of high-end slugs. And those warm stones. It was a heavenly demon stone with a weak fire spell. Ike didn't want to work, but needed the money. He made a decision. He would have to gamble and win a fortune. Dragon Sword was a questionable back alley store that had been getting a lot of attention lately. But he wasn't going to rely on chance. He had a cunning plan. The chest is a countermeasure to buy time when the buff magic that increases luck in the lottery runs out. But with his magic, the effect won't go away for a long time yet. It's a bit of a tricky but quite winning strategy. Or rather, the very idea of gambling was too bad. Walking around, he met Nitra, whose appearance startled him. Ike inquired about his friend's business, to whom he'd given the medicine. Nitra relayed that Rai was fine and ready to serve her master. Ike thought back to the witch at the potion store who was getting revenge on him for taking so long to bargain with her. He had already been helped once, so he asked her to tell her not to worry about returning the favor. He was about to treat him to a kebab, but accidentally pulled out his wallet. He realized it was very important startup capital. Nitra was worried that he had run out of money from buying an expensive medicine. Rai's illness was not a common cold, but Phallus' curse. The cure for it was an elven elixir that was so expensive that not everyone would have the money for such a thing. But Ike didn't want the children to worry. He held out his wallet for him to buy something for Ri, but only something they normally couldn't afford. The child hesitantly accepted the wallet. Ike knew he was now penniless himself. Nitra's small body pressed against him and spoke words of gratitude. Ix felt his heart fill with warmth and joy. He needed to decide what to do now. Help Ryuka tomorrow, look after Lena's store, or worry about what he would eat tonight. Despite the lack of money, it felt warm on his heart. And the stones in his pocket were warm too. The boy wondered if he could sell them to a rich man starved for entertainment. A voice broke the silence. A nicely dressed young man reminded him of the invitation to dinner. Princess Lula was glad that thanks to their handmaiden, they would now go to meet the great magician. Cheyenne was the second princess of the Whiting Kingdom. She was also interested in meeting the creator of the pipe. Lately, she had been a little worried about her mischievous and naive little sister. She was so vulnerable, it made her nervous. Until now, Lula had been reluctant to have dinner with her, but suddenly she invited her to the table herself. The mysterious mage had put forward his conditions. She had no idea of her sister's intentions. Cheyenne had heard that all mages were eccentric and didn't want him to be a bad influence on her Lulu. She asked her mentor for permission to join them for dinner. Her request was unusual, but there were a few precautions that needed to be observed. The girl didn't understand what he meant. The old man had said that the word work was forbidden in the presence of Mr. Ix. He no longer wanted to work at all. Cheyenne had a negative impression of him. It is unfair to run away from what you don't want to do and get only benefits. A person has responsibilities appropriate to his position. She herself is like a caged bird. The old man summarized that she shouldn't ask her guest about work. Their only purpose today was to get to know each other better. Cheyenne's smile was intimidating. Ix didn't know where he was being taken, nor did he expect them to ride in such an amazing carriage. He thanked the attendant for the invitation. He said, embarrassed, that he was only doing his part. The boy guessed that the man he was about to meet was a very noble man. The desire to return home gradually grew stronger. He arrived at his destination. Ix remembered that this was where he had come with Ryuka and Kuma. The attendant was pleased that he was familiar with the secret paths known only to the very privileged, which meant he was from the aristocracy. They went downstairs to a door to which the stranger had the key. The attendant, with a slight smile on his face, gestured for him to step into the unknown. Ix didn't even know what to say. This cafe was a secluded corner in itself. He didn't realize it had a secret door that was a teleportation gate. Ix tensed as he stopped in front of it. The attendant pushed him forcefully into the portal so he wouldn't be too late. This was his first teleportation. He wanted to brag about it to Ryuka and Kuma when he got back, but he wouldn't forgive Mr. Guide. At the palace, they were already waiting for him. He had just stepped out of the portal, and he was already greeted by servants lined up on either side of him. Ix had come here for the food and had not expected this. He was led into a room where the table was decorated with a snow-white tablecloth and comfortable chairs stood around it. The girl with the radiant smile seemed familiar to him. He remembered that he had talked to her when she had helped him. Ix thanked the chamberlain for the invitation, but the man identified himself as a common servant. Looking over the faces of those present, the boy noticed her sister, with whom they looked alike. Cheyenne thanked him for coming and introduced them. The princess invited him to take a seat. Ix started off by saying that he wasn't a very good wizard. Everyone called him a defective mage. But in response, they told him that by making this pipe, he was definitely a great magician. Now that they had all gotten to know each other, Lula suggested dinner. Among the upper classes, the ingredients and rank of the food served was somewhat of a question. The eater answers it differently. They prepared a soup that looked delicious. Spoons of different sizes were provided for the meal. He chose the largest one. Even if it was difficult to use, it was delicious. Cheyenne and the butler watched him closely. It was considered a sign of lack of money. Ix asked where their parents were today. Both took it as a request for a direct audience with the king. Lula called them busy people. It became clear that this was a casual conversation. Following the soup, the next course was served. The guy crossed his arms on his chest. Princess Cheyenne and the butler understood each other half-heartedly. She guessed that gesture meant refusing to have anything to do with them. Ix's problem was that his stomach was already full, but the sight of this dish was so tantalizing that he couldn't take his eyes off it. He regretted that he had snacked on bread on the way here. The old man decided to ask him a question. He asked if he had any problems. Ix remembered that he wanted to sell something. He placed the heavenly demon stones on the table. These warm stones kept him warm in the winter. The butler inquired about their value. It was an empty magic stone with entry-level fire magic. Ix was barely making ends meet, so he would like to sell it for much more if possible. It's free stuff. Ryuka was telling him how to determine the price of an item. When wanting to sell something at a high price, you have to let the buyer set the price. The guy didn't tell them the exact price, leaving it up to them. Cheyenne replied with an awkward hesitation. With the guest's departure, the butler was also confused. Lula decided that a single gold coin could be spent on all of this. But her sister remarked with cold clarity that it would be too generous a gesture. The butler had factored in his reluctance to work. Cheyenne knew he had shown his strength, but he was demanding too much. Did Lula want to play along with him for the rest of her life? Refusal might have aroused his anger. She didn't know the right answer. Lula offered to revisit the question. The royal family could afford it. The elder sister agreed with her. But still, depending on the answer, his opinion might change. Lula thought she was the only one who believed in the great magician. Ix thought about getting 7 small silver coins. Remembering their wealth, he decided a silver one would suffice. Entering the room, he froze. On the table, the coin shone like gems, sprinkling its surface. The boy took it as an excuse to boast of his wealth. Then he could demand a large silver coin without hesitation. He was given the opportunity to determine the amount of the reward himself. He hesitated, since all the coins here were gold. Cheyenne let him choose freely. Ix thought that a large silver coin was best. However, he might be allowed to get a gold one. But there were so many of them. He suspected that they were fakes, among which the real one must be found. So he tried to comprehend the secret meaning behind Miss Xiang's words. It didn't seem to be true. And Ix couldn't use appraisal magic. At most, it was possible to determine by weight. He couldn't make a decision. It was clear from the look on Cheyenne's face that there was a need to hurry. After all, he is a man and must make a choice. He chose only 1 coin as his reward. Silence hung in the hall. Cheyenne looked at him in bewilderment, as if trying to figure out if it was a joke. Ix suddenly doubted his decision. But Lula had faith in the great mage. Her faith gave him strength. Cheyenne concluded that wanting to not work didn't make him greedy. After that, dessert was served on the table. Ix used his head to pick the right coin and got dessert. He was happy. Cheyenne asked the guest to share his specialties with them. He told that his duration increase was very useful. It was true that he could only use entry-level magic. The princess realized that the beginning magic was too weak and it must be hard for him. Ix said that he had studied advanced magic but discarded it. The girl was surprised. She was cramped like a bird in a cage. She was content with the benefits of royalty. She wondered if he regretted his choice. The lad didn't know what was useful and what wasn't. It was the path he had chosen. He considered himself an incompetent man, and he was only becoming more incompetent by the moment. Cheyenne was amazed at his determination to set aside his own advantages. She thought she was destined to marry someone at the behest of the minister. She thought she was doomed. But if you are willing to throw away your advantages, you may be free. Lula solemnly declared that she recognized him as a great magician. Therefore, she asked him to never call himself incompetent again. The boy's heart was filled with warmth and gratitude. He was grateful for the invitation. Cheyenne reciprocated and promised to take care of the stones. Lula hoped the great mage would come again. Ix wanted to complain about this guide, but assumed he would not return. He remembered the gold coin. He still had doubts about the coin's authenticity, so he decided to check it out. If it was real, it would come back in 10 large silver coins. In that instant, he gained an unshakable confidence. The people of the palace didn't know what to do with the pile of gold coins. Princess Lula and the butler knew what to do. It was about the prestige of the Whiting Kingdom. She would make sure that the gold would reach it naturally. Ix didn't hear that because he thought it was fiction. From the moment Lula recognized Ix, he officially became the Grand Mage of the royal family. The mysterious young man was suddenly registered in the highest rank of the sorcerer level. His identity raised a bunch of questions. The Academy of Magicians. A huge organization, the equivalent of an adventurer's guild. And there was a new person at the top of it all of a sudden. Ix, ranked 9th in the rankings, was appointed as the next great mage. None of the mages had ever heard this name before. It was assumed to be some royal illegitimate child. Looks like the princess got a little too excited. They still didn't know who he was. There wasn't even a trace of him in the registry. Magician researcher Cooker decided to take on the task. Using magic, she organized a worldwide search. No information about him was found. Assuming that he was currently out of work, she asked his previous place of employment. They learned that he had previously been a member of an adventurer's guild with rank E and had the nickname of a defective mage. A mage joining an adventurer's guild sounded strange. The girl implied that he had only joined once for disguise, and had already shown himself in all his glory the next time. Cooker inquired about his former specialty. Al reported the same, only with AD rank. Now there was no doubt in their minds. He had definitely been chosen. A number of spells were used. All countermagics proved ineffective. Of course, Ix did nothing. Why isn't Ix registered with the Magicians organization? It's because he learned magic from the High Elves in the Red Forest. And when he tried to join their ranks, he was ridiculed for sacrificing entry-level magic. He was recommended to join the Adventurers Guild. And since Lula had designated him a Grand Mage, he is now officially a mage. Sitting at the table, Ix involuntarily listened to the conversations around him. People were talking about the mysterious mage who had recently taken office. No one had any idea how it happened, but they had even set up traps to track him. He is very experienced, looking like a great magician who was ominously displaying his power. They didn't have a new accreditation for 10 years. When it came to a name, Ix's name was spoken. However, in the same instant, someone quickly spotted the mistake and corrected it to something similar. Ix barely had time to take a breath before his throat constricted. He marveled at the similarity of the names. And if he ignored the pronunciation, he was rooting for him. The boy decided to take a walk and think about what to do today. After all, a walk was great. There were sights he hadn't noticed before. He could play with Ryuka. Or buy something for Nitra and Sister Rai, after they found all the treasures in the moat. It was funny that Nitra looked bored. He decided to go to Ryuka's place, but on the way he met Lena and Auntie. Seeing them, he exclaimed what a coincidence. Now Auntie was about to open the store and wondered if he wanted to stop by for those cloud cakes he wanted. Ike's had other plans. She informed him that some nervous girl was looking for him. He didn't think he knew her. She didn't have a talking stuffed animal with her. She was an adult. Lena was afraid she was his girlfriend. After saying goodbye to him, they added that he would have to come back soon. The guy wondered who could be looking for him like that, and if there were such people at all. The answer found him on its own. The girl rejoiced, finally noticing him. Ike couldn't remember who she was. Remembering the fear in her eyes, he realized that he had seen her somewhere before. Suddenly his memory flashed back to when he had helped her with her buffs. She had asked him to buff her. Her eyes were crazy. The buffs were clearly unnecessary. It seemed to Ike that resting was the best solution. The girl was willing to do anything. Ike felt uncomfortable as several gazes sank into them. He advised her to think hard about it. The girl explained that she had tried doing it with others, but he was the only one who was special. She asked him to do it to her again. She, being the most popular in town, was willing to pay him with her body. Someone in the crowd demanded that she step away from him. Cold contempt flashed in the girl's eyes. Ike hadn't expected Mara, an S-rank adventurer, to be the one to stand up for him. Perhaps she had intended to provide him with assistance. He pinned his hopes on her. The girl blurted out that this night he would spend with her. Ike realized that Mara was the same way. She used magic to get the girl to move away from him. She was afraid to let him go. Mara pulled him against her. He suddenly felt something he had never felt before, a pleasant warmth emanating from her breasts. It was better than the most luxurious slime pillows. It was so soothing in such a way that he lost consciousness. When he woke up, he was lying on a soft bed under the roof. The faces of the two girls expressed impatience. They kept demanding a buff. Ike had no desire to do so. He woke up in an unfamiliar inn. The scientist decided to tell him what she was doing, hoping it would change his mind. Ike thought it was okay to just ask. Syra was trying to prove the structure of the defense. Just the other day, she had gotten caught up in the idea of the grand old woman. He wondered if she really existed. She was someone who could see the future and had been living for a millennium with a wish for eternity. A fortune-telling witch whose body was locked in the void. Researching defenses? This town's lost it. She named 3 things to avoid. A new type of defense, a forest guard, and an electric shock. The talisman that will help them overcome this obstacle is Buff 1. If they forget it, a happy future is closed to them. That's what she said. That's why Ike ran out of magic. When he activated the buff, she noticed the stubbornness was unnecessary. He had dragged her into this and felt guilty. And then Mara made a statement. Without Ike's magic, she was going to throw up. She had to drink too much potion to take a series of shots because she doesn't have much mana. But what would happen if she didn't have a series of shots? Ike waited to see what she would say next. The girl started repeating that she was Mara Ion, and she was sick without Ike's magic. The boy stopped her. After so much persuasion, she had managed to get her way. But he still wasn't satisfied. When it came time to pay, Syra admitted that there was no money. If she didn't sell her research, she had no income. So she provided her body. Ike knocked her on the head for being so stupid. He let her give her the money after selling her research. She was grateful to him. Defense is magic, so it's impossible to prove its structure. That's why she came to this city, to investigate the rumors of a new type of protection. Ike, thinking she was about his defense, replied that it was just a stunt. Of course, in terms of technology, that's impossible. Energy without a power source only results lightning recreated with magic. Syra was disappointed at yet another failure. She decided she had chosen the wrong approach. Magic might be impossible, but electrical discharges could be created with science. She had found a way out. Ike inquired as to why she worked so hard. Syra replied that a sense of mission was the main reason. She called it childish stupidity. The girl wanted to be great and have everyone look up to her. She was afraid of offending him in any way. Ike could understand that. He asked Mara's opinion. She couldn't forget when the children thanked her, so she expressed her gratitude to him. The boy decided it was time to leave. They said goodbye to him in a way that once again made people think wrong. Finally, he came to Ryuka's house. She almost never came out, so he walked in, apologizing for bothering her. He peeked out of the door. Multicolored confetti flew into the air. The boys congratulated him on his position as a great magician. Ike was convinced that Ryuka was mistaken, for that wizard's name was similar to his. She knew that the hero's newspaper had long since lost its credibility. The truth was hidden. It was enough to remove just one letter. She didn't understand why all this circus. Ike was sure the cake was delicious. He had no choice. The boy exclaimed that he was a great wizard. The cake was in fact delicious, and Ike's face couldn't help but express pleasure. She inquired when he would go to her work again. The boy didn't understand her. Ryuka knew that he would soon run out of money. Ike stated that she made a great cake. He sold a warm stone for a gold coin. The girl decided it wasn't fair. He claimed it as his own. Maybe it would work with something else. Kumakichi suggested earrings, but they would be a bit hard to heat. Then Ryuka thought of a former pocket watch. The metal was easily heated. Ike offered to give it to Kuma. The girl asked not to be rude to him. The boy knew he wouldn't burn. Magical flames were different from normal flames. Fire that enchanted would not turn it into charcoal. Then the bear agreed to do it. The rabbit decided to join in. Ike cast a spell. A fire enchantment was performed. The bodies of the plush toys were filled with warmth. Ryuka happily hugged the warm and fuzzy Kuma. It seemed to her as if he was truly alive. Ike was glad she was content, agreeing that it felt good. The girl demanded with a hiccup that she step away from Ike. She was jealous of him with the doll. It looked cute and funny. Ryuka called it her duty. He tried to make a joke, and her face flooded with color. She threw a hurt look at him. The girl defiantly turned away, but still he apologized. As a thank you for the cake, he was willing to help her if she needed anything. Ryuka said there was a place she wanted to go to. Ike pulled up to Ryuki's house, anticipating a pleasant ride. He looked out the window and called out to her. She was already waiting for him, ready to travel. The girl couldn't sleep last night, thinking about the music festival in Shiptown. Ryuka was known for creating luxury items that were paid for with big money. The coachman was in a good mood. The only way to get to the neighboring town was by carriage, and he wouldn't be able to thank Ryuka for that. The boy assumed she had left the rabbits behind. Here the girl was confused, since she had never been on vacation before. Kumakichi thought they wouldn't be able to take them all anyway, and offered to apologize to them later. Meanwhile, at the hotel where Ike was staying, Ace Man was going to pay him a visit. The Viscount had promised to distribute these pipes to the nobles, and they had less and less time left until that day. They had to get Ike's to make 200 of them as soon as possible. A pretty girl looked out of the room. Ry was dressed in a maid's outfit. Iceman introduced himself as the Viscount's butler. He thought this was Ike's room. She replied that it was correct, but the gentleman had been absent for 3 days. He developed a feeling of contempt. Ike's was telling others how rotten they all were, but letting a little girl in his room play maid. Another silhouette appeared from behind him. Nitral looked familiar to him. He was sure he had seen him before. It was his friend who had a cold. Nitral recognized the Viscount's assistant. Ry admitted that she was actually the one who was sick. It wasn't really a cold. She was suffering from Farah's curse. And that's where Mr. Ike's came to her rescue. He gave his own money to save her. Even now that they had lost their house after yesterday's fire, they were free to use his room until they found a new place to live. Aceman had created a false impression of him. He realized that Ike's was a good man. Nitra added that on top of that, Ike's was a great mage who constantly treated him to kebabs. Ry anxiously whispered to him that it was a secret. Ike's could only use elemental magic. Butler couldn't believe he was making them call him a great mage. He decided to pretend he hadn't heard it. He realized that Ike's wouldn't be back for a while yet. With that, he withdrew. Aceman guessed he was on his way to Shiptown. The grimoires on the gates leading out of the city could leave ID data. They could see who was coming and going in real time. The territorial army had been notified, so if a grimoire had Ike's name on it, one should guard it, but if someone didn't have an ID, they would be detained. Ike's was on vacation. They'd arranged for 200 tubes before they left. He wouldn't just leave him. At the gate, Ike said that the 3 of them were going to Shiptown, a neighboring town, for 3 days. When they were ready to be let through, the carriage staggered. Suddenly they were asked to stop. The horse gave a startled neigh. Ryuka, unable to hold on, fell right on top of him. Their bodies entwined in an unexpectedly awkward embrace. Ike's tried to realize what had happened. The soldiers noticed an unaccounted for person in their carriage. The boys were asked to step out. The carriage was checked from the inside. The soldier was sure there were 4 of them. But there was no one in the carriage. Kumakichi could not contain his indignation. The soldier screamed in terror upon hearing the bear's voice. The boys were used to this reaction. They could only emit a thin squeak in response to the toy's threats. Ike's explained to him that he was interfering with their work. The soldier inquired about the stuffed animal. The boy told him that Kuma was a spirit-like inhabitant of the Land of Voids. He would not harm them, so he urged them not to worry. The bear continued to hurl insults until he was silenced. The soldier doubted they were okay. Ike summarized that it was a harmless stuffed animal. Believing it to be a genie, the soldier apologized for doubting him. The boys were wished a happy journey. Kumakichi was not happy with what had happened. Ryuka didn't understand what he had set up there. Kuma had his own card, that's why he wasn't weird. The guy didn't see anything wrong with not having a card. However, the girl called it important. They used grimoires on the gate to keep out criminals, and he had forgotten to take his card. That wasn't true. He didn't have it at all because the guild master had destroyed it. Ryuka couldn't let him be without a card. She offered to make him a temporary one in Shiptown. Ike's didn't realize what he was doing. He outsmarted the butler's surveillance and passed through the gate without incident. Thus began Ike's 3-day journey. At the time, the butler was puzzled, unable to figure out where he had disappeared to. The guys arrived in Shiptown energized by the music festival atmosphere. They had a little trouble on the road, but they had arrived here. They paid 2 small silver coins for the carriage ride. There was music coming from everywhere. The atmosphere was amazing. Ike enjoyed it. He thought he had never seen so many people in his life. They would soon be at the tent site. Tents were everywhere. Temporary tents were set up in the meadows for the night. It was a seasonal custom. The boys were led to their tent. But Ryuka couldn't move from her spot. The girl seemed to be gripped by panic. Ryuka had a phobia of other people. She was afraid to be here. Ike decided to take care of it. He asked the coachman to change the destination to an inn on the outskirts of the city. Since there were no inns on the outskirts of town, he suggested just putting up a tent in a convenient location. Ike rented a tent, but there were so many people here that he couldn't find a place to put it. Ryuka was still shaking, and it was already getting dark. Ike insisted on traveling outside the city. They were going to a festival later. He hoped there wouldn't be a problem with that. There was no need to pay extra. It's already dark at this time of day, so the road would take longer. Ryuka said quietly that she was sorry. Ike understood that she felt guilty, but he couldn't agree with her thoughts. He didn't regret anything, and he wasn't going to make anyone else regret it. He could only use elemental magic. He was called a defective wizard. He had no self-confidence, but Ryuka had given him the courage to be himself. Now it was his turn. Ike needed Ryuka's silver cloth. He wanted her to make Kuma a wizard's hat. The bear rejoiced at the sudden gift. The girl, not realizing what it was for, still agreed. Using the ghost dance, Ryuka retrieved the cloth from the suitcase, which slipped out of the suitcase as if enchanted. It was something incredible, magic that Ike had seen for the first time. She could make the cloth dance and mimic ghosts. It was time for Kumakichi to prove himself. In one deft move, he cut it into scraps like a skilled tailor, creating something new and beautiful out of it. The shreds floated in the air, as if obeying his will. Intertwining with each other, the 7 needles began to create something marvelous. A hat swirled in the air and descended on the bear. It gave the bear an even cuter and more adorable appearance. Ryuka curiously asked the guy what he was going to do with it. Ike had cast a spell on a regular pointy hat and would now show them a miracle. First of all, he activated the shield enchantment, increasing the defense. Ryuka guessed that he had increased its durability. Producing a lamp, they pointed it outside. The hat illuminated everything around them. It was the brightest lantern Ryuka had ever seen. Ike felt joy seeing her feeling better. Kumakichi knew the gift wasn't for him, but he liked it. The boy agreed to create another one for him. The coachman was amazed at so much light. Despite the time of night, it was as bright as day. The coachman asked if he was sure he wanted to keep it. Ike had made the lanterns with Ryuka and her friends, so he knew they would last for a whole year. It was enough for his work. Now he was beginning to love it. From the hills, the boys had a great view of all of Shiptown. When they had enjoyed it a little, he did not delay in setting up the tent. The coachman left them for a while to tie up the horses. It was time to get some rest. Ryuka wondered about the size of the tent that Ike had rented. He would say it was about average. It would probably be too small for 2 people. But Ryuka and Kuma had their own tents, so there was nothing to worry about. He and Kuma had already picked it out. The bear kicked it. The girl stated that they couldn't go on vacation and spend time apart. Ryuka wanted to convey that she was invincible with him. She activated the Ghost Cross spell. It was Kumakichi's turn to prove himself. Ike stood there puzzled, trying to figure out what was going on. But suddenly his face contorted in horror. The boys were building a majestic castle that was about to fall apart. There was not much time left, so they hurried him. Ix hurried over to them to help reinforce the structure. Ryuka's strength had left her, so she couldn't stand on her feet. Ix was instantly at her side, picking her up. His hand gently touched her cheek. She was proud that she had made a castle for her prince. The bear called the cooing boys to the castle. Ix took up the door hammer. Inside, the castle was completely empty. This was a little embarrassing. The boys were called out panically from outside. The coachman had missed them, and even here the lock had suddenly appeared. Ix awkwardly apologized that it was little more than a simple tent. They had made it together some time ago. He allowed him to enter as well. The coachman couldn't contain his admiration, shocked to the core. If there had been more furniture in here, it would have been wonderful. It could be arranged. Kumakichi knew that ghosts with luxurious furniture were far worse at home. It would take a constant supply of magic to maintain it. But with their buddy's mana buffs, it was possible. Since Ryuka was feeling dizzy, Ix decided he would do it himself. From her suitcase, the girl laid out flasks of potions. To recover, she emptied them. Ix knew they would run out of mana early. She busied herself with creating a dollhouse. The haunted house was created with a wave of her hand. The mansion stretched like a giant along the skyline. Its majestic Gothic roofs rushed upwards. It looked intimidating, so Ix had a bad feeling about it. Kuma was rushing him to give him mana. The guy didn't know if that was really a good idea. He activated the mana attraction. Mysterious sounds came from the castle, as if an unknown force was awakening from a long sleep. There was a shadow monster, but the bear didn't care about that. However, someone unlike him panicked. The coachman, pale and trembling, found no place to stand. He regretted the imposition and wished only that this ghost house would disappear. Ix couldn't make it disappear all at once. He was under a buff now. The coachman's panic was only getting worse. Ix didn't know how to defeat the shadow. Ryuka, however, remained calm as she continued to work on clearing the house. They could do it in the blink of an eye. This night had been tiring. It was hard to eliminate every last one of them, but once they were gone, it was much better. Ryuka came out of the bathroom, feeling clean and peaceful. The guy offered her some ice ball juice. Ix was going to head there next. The girl thanked him for a great day. Ix was having fun too. Morning came, and Kumakichi greeted Ryuka. She answered him, awakening from her sleep. The girl ordered the rabbits to make her a cup of tea. Ryuka dressed slowly, choosing simple but comfortable clothes. She had no intention of going anywhere today. But suddenly, she remembered that Ix could come over to play. Ryuka started going through her outfits, trying to pick out something special. She asked Kumakichi which one he liked best. He couldn't give a definite answer. Ryuka thought about the fact that Ix often talked about cats. And Ix hadn't particularly stopped by her place that day. After she finished getting dressed, her tea went cold. Ix felt good after his bath. He admired the beautiful view outside. He was happy. While Ix was enjoying his trip, the Viscount hurriedly summoned the butler. He ordered to urgently capture the defective mage for treason. Ixman didn't yet realize what he had done. The man replied that he had tried to kill him. His bathtub was filled with boiling water. But that was just a trick. He had already prepared cold water and tried to kill him. The butler replied with cold calmness. Had the magic of the big bath finally run out? Just in case, he decided to put up a sign forbidding its use. The Viscount had an idea. Iceman prepared himself to listen to him. Redley decided to order the territorial army and the forest guard to look for Ix. He will personally talk to them. Butler will organize it immediately. The captain of the forest guard was a member of the Hero Association. They're like hyenas. He didn't want to show his weakness. Viscount's reception room. The forest guard representative Azel noticed that the army was still as weak as before and dirty, while the territorial army representative Reg said that the armor deteriorates after training, and the forest guards don't seem to train properly. The very fact of training made the old man laugh. He had already been providing full defense for 5 years, and the youngsters were talking a lot. The Viscount greeted both of them. Demonstrating deference, the city's protector, Isel, was ready to come to the rescue at any moment. Reg inquired about the purpose of their invitation. Redley told of a defective wizard working for them that had left his post and escaped. He wanted him captured immediately. Isel fully supported him, expressing his displeasure with the youth. Reg asked why he had run away. The Viscount wasn't going to reveal the reason to them. They had another purpose. He was giving them a good opportunity. The winner would be given a large budget. Butler would give them the details. Iceman coughed to get their attention. There were 2 conditions. The first, report your progress once a day. 2, Ix must be caught unharmed. He was waiting for good news. In the fight for Ix, the army controlling the territory had an overwhelming advantage. The boss had a visitor. Yurikar allowed entry. His girlfriend decided to leave them alone with the visitor. Isel had his own secret plan. He decided to give the job to Yurikar. He assumed the forest ranger had come to meet him. He must have been in a hurry to show up in person. Yurikar didn't give him high expectations. The old man explained it as a joke. He wanted them to capture someone immediately. He spoke Ix's name. Yurikar said he would take him for 3 large silvers up front and 1 gold afterward. Azel wanted to know what would happen if he failed. The client would lose money. They would lose trust. But if that didn't happen, they'd just laugh it off. Isley couldn't pay them up front until they showed them what they were made of. He was asked what he wanted to see. A lot of pressure was put on him. Yurikar asked about the advance. It amounted to 5 silver coins. He ordered the bald man to be called to him. He was told to go immediately to the headquarters of the territorial army. Yurikar's man, the Mage Skin, could use listening magic. He activated a clear ear. He could hear the territorial army meeting where the Viscount's order was discussed. They needed to know where Ix was. They said the man was being tracked through the grimoires and was withholding information from them. No one knew his exact whereabouts. The soldiers came up with a cunning plan. They would secretly rent an ambush room and arrest him when he returned to the inn. Ix hadn't fallen into the hands of the territorial army yet, so they still had an advantage. They would take the room ahead of him before the army did. With that, they turned to Ren. A large silver piece would be given to whoever pulled it off. The girl disposed of it. Yurikar knew that even for Ix this should be a problem. He would let the old man know later how it went tomorrow. The next day, disappointment overtook him. He was going to give him a progress report, but there was still no progress. The presence of the territorial army made things more difficult. Time was running out, so the search had to be hurried. The old man decided to throw in some extra work, for which he would require extra pay. They had enough men, so they would search by themselves. The boss was going to start by talking to the informant. Yurikar met Rai by chance, knowing that their house was on fire. He asked if she was working somewhere now. The girl told him that until she found a place to live, Mr. Ix had decided to keep her. Yurikar took advantage of this and asked where he was. That she didn't know. He hoped she wouldn't get sick again. Rai assured him that the Lord's room was amazing. The floor was constantly warmed by the fire, and there was fresh air at the same time. There was also a hot shower, a washing machine, and even a jug of endless water. Ryuka concluded that this man was as rich as a Viscount. He suspected that the fellow had achieved this by stealing from Redley, but he decided to concentrate on the work at hand. They arrived at the doll princess's house. This is where the informant had directed them. The team made themselves known by ringing a bell. The door slowly opened. Ryuka sent his subordinates inside, remaining outside. Suddenly, a loud sound was heard from inside the house that made his hair stand on end. The boys reported that they had fallen into a trap. He went to help in a hurry. Ryuka felt they had screwed up and were ambushed. He got in through the window. His face contorted at what he saw. Someone had managed to tie up a giant like the bald man. The boss's goal was to find the target. Remembering the talking bear, he realized that they should have been warned about him. Rim was also trapped, being strung up on strings. He pleaded with the boss to stay away, but he ignored his words and fell into the trap. The house was defended by rabbits. He was allowed to voice his last wish. He was almost speechless when he found out they were talking too. They just wanted to find Ike's. It turned out they had similar interests. The rabbits told him that the traders were in Shiptown and asked him to take them with them. They wouldn't let them just leave them here. The rabbits could be threatening. Second morning in Shiptown. Ryuka was already awake. She showed herself out of the door. Her face was glowing with happiness. He brought her milk for breakfast because it turned out to be very tasty. Kumakichi started making tea with it, though it wasn't really for tea. The flavorful drink spilled into the cups. The tea and milk was also delicious. The girl felt guilty for inviting him to the music festival, but she couldn't go because she didn't like crowds. But Ike's liked the carriage ride and the atmosphere of the festival itself. Also, the guy was so impressed with the castle that he even wanted to stay there all day. But they had come all that way, so she asked if there was anything he wanted to do. And such a thing there was. The guild master had destroyed his map, and he wanted to make a replacement. She realized why he didn't have an ID card. Ryuka was angry at the guild master. The guy had noticed that he was no longer a member of the guild and hadn't seen the guild master lately because he had stopped coming to the inn. He was fine now. She assumed he would be a great mage now. Ike's knew they wouldn't even let him set foot outside the door. He was going to be a merchant of his own goods. Maybe he could live off the warm stones. The boy was going to make his card now. Ryuka was silent and staring at one point. She decided to go with him. He said Ryuka didn't have to do that, but she wasn't going to leave him alone or he'd be in trouble. Ike believed in his own strength. Kumakichi jumped onto his shoulder. He explained that she meant girls who might fall in love with him. Still, he didn't think it was possible, but she was really worried. The guy told her he'd be fine even if he made new friends. They were best friends with her, after all. She snorted in response. There weren't many people on the streets in the morning. Ike had planned to go to the trade guild and go about his business, expecting to be back by noon. Ryuka could feel their gazes on her. Far away, but a woman, and more than one, was looking at her. He was afraid that it was really something bad. After what he had been told earlier, he thought about it in a strange way. There was a look of displeasure on the girl's face. She stopped him by tugging on his sleeve. They arrived at the commercial guild where the information center of the music festival was. He was bothered by the stairs, so he felt he had to take care of something. The woman asked if they were related. She listed the reasons why they might be here. Ike's explained that he just needed a guild card. She felt it was possible to get by without them. The boy knew this town was kind of rough. She assumed they wanted to go to Forestland. Getting there without a card is not easy. She regretted that they couldn't give them out during the festival because there was no one in charge. Kumakichi asked her not to be so stubborn and to think of a way out. The response followed their usual reaction. Ike's made the decision to run. He realized that he was in a hurry. Anyone would be scared if a bear spoke to them. Kumakichi noticed that the pursuer was finally showing his tail. The eyes of those hiding behind the various hiding places were upon them. The pursuers were indeed here, which startled Ike's. They realized that they had been spotted. The girls explained that they would not harm them, and asked them to follow them to speak with the mistress. They said it would only take a minute. The boys were allowed to enter. They didn't yet know what Ike's had gotten them into again. The guests stood before Mrs. Amin. She greeted them. The boys were wary, not even knowing who she was. She introduced herself as the queen of the neighboring kingdom of Iron, Amin of the dwarf race. Ike's introduced them. Recognizing Ryuka's shyness, she ordered her men out of here. The boy cut to the chase. She admitted that she had gotten a report from one of her men. She got so curious that she couldn't help herself. Ike's held his breath. He figured this was the beginning of his legendary popularity. Amin stepped up to the lead. She wanted to know where they got that new Crazy Doll bag. As they could already see, she is a Crazy Doll fan and really wanted to get her hands on that bag. Ike's realized that she had called them to find out about the bag. He turned to Ryuka in bewilderment. The girl was sorry that he wasn't very popular. He was incredibly embarrassed. The legend of Ike's popularity never began. Amin repeated her request. If they couldn't say where they got it, she was willing to buy it at their price. Ryuka didn't want to tell under what circumstances she had gotten that bag. And she couldn't sell it either, not for any money. She just didn't know how to say it. The queen didn't understand what was going on. Ike's reintroduced her friend to her. He said that Ryuka was the designer of Crazy Doll. The queen was overcome with trepidation. She confessed that she was a huge fan of her and asked for an autograph. Kumakichi wouldn't let her get close to her. Amin wanted to place an order with her. Ike's voiced the only condition. Ryuka wasn't just looking at the money, she was also looking at the customer himself. After inquiring about his relationship with her, she suddenly realized who he was. The queen was certain that he was her boyfriend. With that, she instantly passed Ryuki's test. Amin shrieked happily and raised her hands up in the air, glowing with joy. She seemed hyperactive to him. He felt relieved. She was in a very good mood and was willing to help them if needed. Ryuka remarked that as long as she paid her fee, that was all that was required. As for Ike's, he considered himself a normal escort first and foremost. Bear insisted on getting an ID card. She realized the guy didn't have one. He used to have an Adventurers Guild card, but it had been destroyed by the guild master. There seemed to be a reason for it. The queen has made a decision. She would fulfill his wish. The queen handed them a priest's medal. It was originally intended for the gifted. Whoever received it was recognized as a priest of their country. It had their name on it, so they could use it as identification. Ryuka caught his attention by pulling at the fabric of the garment. She noticed that they matched. He agreed with her. The queen still had something else to say. There were some benefits attached to this medal. If they show this medal, they get a free drink at the bar. That meant it was alcoholic. Amin noticed that this privilege was rare, even for dwarves. Ix didn't drink, so it was unlikely he would have the opportunity to take advantage of the privilege. She suggested listening to music if the boys had no plans for the rest of the evening. Guessing that she was going to go to a music festival with them, Ix explained that Ryuka didn't like crowds. That wasn't what Amin had meant. The queen had no need to go to the festival. They would put the performers on a ship. There it was, the power of the rich. Eventually, the guys gave up. Ix was glad that he was able to enjoy the music with Ryuka. The queen was enjoying a drink from her glass. The boy was grateful to her for the evening. He was still elated, but they needed to get back to the tent. Amin suggested they stay the night. She thought her ship was more comfortable than his tent. Kumakichi stated that his friend's tent was bigger than this one. The queen didn't understand how that was possible. Ix awkwardly replied that the rooms in the ghost house were the same as those in a cheap hotel. He tried to stop Kumakichi. The queen had a desire to see that tent. They had a new course. They began to take off. The boys should have held on to something close by. They marveled at the view from the heights. Amin concluded that the key to a dwarf's popularity was not money or face, but skill. Ryuka hesitated to look down. The alert level had risen to 3, and full alert was in effect. Amin was urgently summoned to the wheelhouse. Indignant, she hurried there. Pushing the door open, she rushed inside. She was about to be told something important. They had discovered a suspicious lock of unknown affiliation in the landing zone. Both Ix and Ryuka realized what the lock was, but remained silent. The queen hesitated for a moment. She turned to the guys with the fact that strange things were happening at the spot where their tent was standing. The boy admitted that this was their tent. The queen's eyes widened in surprise. He explained that Ryuka and Kuma had built it, and he had helped a little. Amin marveled that the great craftsman Ryuka did not limit herself to just clothes and leather goods. She even built a castle, showing great skill. The castle of unknown affiliation turned out to be friendly. The alarm was cancelled. Ix thanked them for the ride. The queen wanted them to have a tour. This castle was even larger than usual, but it was empty. This was where they would hold tomorrow's event. If they needed anything here, Ix allowed them to use it. Then they went to the ghost house. It was so cozily arranged that the guests couldn't take their eyes off its interior. Amin doubted it was as easy to build as a tent. It was so bright and warm. The most advanced magical tools were utilized here. The first floor wasn't used, so Ix let her stay here. Amin seemed to have the urge to explore flowing in her people's veins. One of them discovered that these water bottles didn't even have magic stones in them, and the water was still coming in. The queen had witnessed this firsthand. The guests took a keen interest in his developments. Ix realized it was going to be a lively night. The Viscount hoped to find Ix before the evening ball. An aristocrat called out to him. He wanted to know what had happened to the magic device that created the promised cool breeze. The hot season was almost over. The man asked about the delivery schedule. The Viscount snorted that they were working on it. The aristocrat was extremely displeased. He was so eager to introduce him to the princess, but he had nothing to show his daughter. That was the end of their relationship. The guests were discussing Viscount Radley. His joy was instantly replaced by disappointment. They talked about the lights in the house going out with the disappearance of the chief wizard, and about the little girls he had kidnapped. They still hadn't been able to find the defective wizard. He had caused quite a hell at the ball. The Viscount was outraged at these incompetent people. The butler regretted it, but they still didn't know where they were. If they didn't get the defective mage to make the devices, they could lose the house. When he coughed, Iceman called for the doctor. Ike's absence depressed him more and more. Perhaps he realized he was being chased and was hiding, but he didn't seem to be that kind of man. Butler didn't know what to do. Suddenly it hit him. He decided to use a worldwide search and turned to the Mage Academy. Cooker was open to suggestions. Iceman had no doubts about her. After providing information about Ike's, he offered to find out where he was. The girl instantly perked up. She recognized the 9th Sir Ike's. Iceman wondered why she called him that. Cooker only knew him from one side. She activated a worldwide search. Ike's current location was Shiptown, where he worked with the puppeteer Ryuka. He decided it was impossible, since there were no reports of trespassing in this city. Ike's couldn't get through the heavy security. The girl was willing to tell him about it for free. The great mage scoffed at the search. The Ike's he was looking for had to be able to use only elemental magic. She called it a high level of mimicry. That was all they could help him with. Iceman came to the conclusion that they were being played by a cunning manipulator. But now they knew where he was. They'd let Reg and the others know. Above Shiptown. Reg looked at every street corner where Ike's might be hiding. Suddenly his attention was caught by a man with his head bowed down. The dragon lowered its altitude sharply, and Reg found himself behind the stranger. The dragon descended with a clatter, making the man wince. Reg was sure that the man he was looking for was standing in front of him. The stranger wouldn't let him near him. Reg stated that he was Ike's. Reg, a captain in the territorial army, powerful but not very smart, seemed to have mixed up his memories of Ike's and the bounty hunter. Meanwhile in the city, the girl noticed something amazing. She was fascinated by the rabbits who were sewing. A whole crowd had gathered around them. Bunny didn't understand how he got involved in this story. This sort of thing wasn't for show. Ryuka wouldn't let him start sewing while he waited here in ambush. The boss was called out. Ren reported that they had received the money. People put the money here themselves when they saw the rabbits. The rabbit pierced Ryuka's back with its intimidating stare. They hadn't made any progress in finding Ike's, so they should have moved. Turning to the residents, Ren announced that they were looking for a boy named Ike's and a girl with a teddy bear. If they brought them to them, they would give them a toy rabbit. Many people wanted to get their hands on this adorable little thing. The rabbit thought they would find her once they got to Shiptown. But he couldn't find it. Ike's found himself in an awkward position. He wished Ryuka and Mrs. Amin would leave him alone. The queen urged him not to be embarrassed. It seemed to her that he moved toward her first. The boy was worried about Ryuka, who might not have enough room. Amin felt good in the castle tent. He noticed it was because of her. To fill the huge space, the dwarves had brought couches and stuff from the airship. The performers arrived, and he could hear them playing again. The queen waited for the next performer. It was time for the next act to come out. There was a tall man among the girls. They were worried about something. Ike sensed a bad atmosphere. He was addressed by name. Ryuka reported that their troupe was hoping to see him here and get an autograph, and they guessed right. Ike was familiar with the boy's face with him. Kumakichi remembered that he was playing the role of a decoy. The boy realized this was another attempt to get him back. Ryuka introduced himself as the king from the slums and added that he was ordered to return it to the old man, so he should follow him. If not, he would have to take action. Rai and her pet could get hurt. Ike realized that even if they defeated them here, the other party could find out about it and do something to Rai and the others in the inn. He couldn't let that happen. The boy agreed to go with him, on the condition that they would not harm Rai, Nitra, or anyone else but him. Urikar had made the promise. Ryuka was dreading parting with him. She got up from the couch and just stared at him, unable to do anything. A voice stopped them. The queen asked why he had been taken away. Urikar replied that he would receive a gold coin for his capture. Hiring him was no problem for her. A man could not change employers so easily. She offered him 5 gold coins. Ren confirmed the authenticity of all the coins. A chuckle erupted. Urikar, as if mesmerized, agreed to work for her. She liked understanding people. She demanded to take her gold and go home. Urikar hoped that Ix would take care of Rai. The uninvited guests disappeared behind the door. Ix pondered his words. Ryuka rushed over to him. She was glad they hadn't taken him away. He apologized for making her worry again. The girl thought it was unfair to take people hostage. The boy thanked Amin for saving him. He promised to pay her back someday. But she didn't demand anything in return. She was just glad they were safe. He tried to calm Ryuka down. She asked him to stop sacrificing himself. Ix felt he had no other choice this time. Ryuka wanted him to think of himself first. If he needed help, she would help him next time, no matter what it cost her. She didn't want him to leave her alone. The boy imagined what would happen if he did that. He could hurt Ryuka. Hugging her, Ix thanked her for her concern and apologized for making her feel insecure. The girl hadn't expected him to act so harshly. Ix hastily pulled away. He extended his pinky finger. The boy promised to take good care of himself. Ryuka smiled happily. Someone wanted her to promise him something. The rabbit asked her to never leave him again. The girl's eyes filled with tears. She froze, unable to move. Ix realized she was in trouble. He didn't know this rabbit could talk. The queen didn't know what had happened, but she thought they were being sought out there. She asked to come to her country where they would be welcome. Ix needed time to think. Since they had signed the contract, he had ignored himself for the past 5 years. Ix wondered if he was happy with his life. But one part of him was empty. Ix came face to face with his heart. He turned to his emptiness. It transformed, taking the form of a wizard in a hat and robe. The void said no. This all-encompassing emptiness was part of him. He knew nothing of himself. He seemed content with this joyous event. Ix asked if there was anything he could do for her. He apologized for making her feel bad. He made her eat grotesque food. He apologized even when it wasn't his fault. He made her work herself to the bone. This time, he would make it up to her for all the times he had hurt her. All she had to do was tell him. He'd made a promise. Void thought about what she wanted. She thought of the slime pillow. This little creature had the same desires as him. It confirmed that this was indeed his void. Ix called out to Ryuka. She was surprised at such a rush. He informed her of his decision to return home the next day. The bear was saddened by the news of their departure. Ryuka had a lot of fun while she was here, and she felt a little sad to leave. She offered to come back next year. His face lit up with joy. He enthusiastically agreed. The queen saw that they would be leaving tomorrow. She had enjoyed her time with them, for which she thanked them. The boys were also grateful for her kindness. They had a lot of fun. She wanted to ask her handmaidens to assemble their tent. Ix told of its limitation. This tent could only last 1 year, but they could keep it. He had given them nothing in exchange for their help, so this was his way of thanking them. They were ecstatic when they found out about it. Amin remarked that even if it was as a token of gratitude, you can't take something that good for free. She wanted them both to accept 5 gold pieces each. More importantly, she was worried about Ike's pursuit. The boy thought it was Viscount Radley who was after him, so he just turned him down again. It had happened before. The queen knew the stubborn man. She was worried, so she gave them all a ride. She assured them that her ship was safe and that they would get there very quickly. Ike's felt bad that she had helped them all the way to the end. He had relied on her. The rabbits asked permission to ride in their carriage. The Viscount greeted Queen Amine. With her, those who had been sought throughout Shiptown had arrived at the castle. He didn't realize the boy had bothered the queen. He admitted that he had spent a lot of effort searching for her. Without wasting any time, the Viscount wanted to give him a job and even pay him 3 gold pieces for the whole thing. Ike became convinced that he had started the whole thing. He had gotten a lot of people into this mess and caused just as much trouble. The boy firmly stated that he would never work for him again. He flared with anger and threatened to lock him in the dungeon. The Viscount was afraid of falling in the eyes of the queen. Amine intervened, saying that Ike was one of their priests, and she would not allow him to be harmed or insulted. The butler, sensing the moment had arrived, turned to Her Majesty. He had a request for her. She hoped he wasn't going to repeat after his master. Iceman informed her that they had a 50-year-old wine. As an apology, he opened their wine cellar for her. The Viscount was confused, for this was his collection. Sensing that they were in danger, the butler advised him to leave Ike's and go to the queen. Amine was glad for the opportunity to not only talk, but also to have a good drink. At this, she left the boys to it, hoping that they would drop in for a visit. The Viscount cast a disgruntled glance at Ike's, for which his precious collection, which he looked at every evening, was in danger of disappearing. Redley intended to make the lad repent for not taking him in, though Ike had refused to do so himself. Kumakichi was surprised that the queen herself had interceded for them. Ryuka thought Ike himself had played a part in that. She asked to be escorted home. The boy took her hand. A warm smile shone on his face. The agreement to walk her home was said with sincere joy. They walked through the quiet streets of the town, immersed in a silent dialogue of gazes. Time seemed to dissolve into the atmosphere, and soon they were at her house. Ryuka thanked him. But it seemed to Ike that he should be the one to thank. He felt alive with her, and he was grateful for the invitation. There was a look of unease in the girl's eyes. Ryuka lowered her head, as if trying to hide from his gaze. All the way there she thought and wished time would stop like this. The last few days they had been together made her think about it even more. She didn't want to leave. The girl was sure it had to happen right now. She hoped she had enough strength. Ryuka confessed that she loved Ike very much. She didn't want to give him away to anyone, so if he could hear her, let him date only her. She said it, and even loud enough to be heard. Ryuka didn't know if Ike felt the same way she did. She made an effort to open her eyes. She thought she had embarrassed him. But there was no sign of Ike's. If Kumakichi had been in his place, he would have fled long ago. That moment would forever be etched in Ryuki's memory. She was incredibly embarrassed. The bear decided to pretend that he didn't hear that. Still, they didn't understand where Ike was in such a hurry. At this moment, he was flying swiftly towards a pillow of slime. That image consumed all his thoughts, pushing everything else out of his mind. People were busy searching for Ike while he slipped past them. He was rewarded with a large silver coin. Ike heard his name called. Perhaps Viscount Radley had told them to look for him, but he had turned him down not too long ago after all. Perhaps the others hadn't been told yet. People didn't even notice him, probably because he's not very conspicuous. The guy was on his way to the hotel. But on the way to his room, he He walked into a trap. 2 soldiers grabbed him. They did not know for what purpose the Viscount had ordered him to be brought to him, but they followed his orders. Ix explained that he had met with the Viscount and they had already closed the matter. The soldiers continued to be stubborn in their insistence. Hearing the noise, Rai opened the door and greeted her host. He was almost home with his pillow. The girl had heard part of the conversation, but she didn't think he had done anything bad that would get him taken away. The soldiers were not told the details either. Suddenly, there was a flicker of doubt in their eyes. Ix was tired of saying he didn't want to work anymore. The reason they had detained him was a job offer he had turned down some time ago. This moment could have been a turning point, because they realized that he hadn't done anything criminal and just didn't want to work. The soldiers secluded themselves and concluded that he was not a threat. Hoping they understood him, Ix decided to go inside. But the soldiers could not believe him. They were obliged to ask him to follow them to prove his innocence. They dragged him after them. Refusal made him more suspicious. Suddenly, a small object fell out of his pocket with a clinking sound. He had dropped the priest's medal. Ix demanded it back, for it was a gift from Queen Amin. The medal was emblazoned with his name, and the soldiers made sure it was authentic. This meant one thing. Ix was the priest of the Dwarf Kingdom. The two knelt down, expressing respect and remorse. They realized that everything he had said was true, and the Viscount had given the order to capture him out of his prowess for his own selfish purposes. Ix felt uncomfortable, but still confirmed their words. This medal given to him by Madame Amin had helped him out. Now he could go home in peace. The boy finally returned to his favorite room. He threw his hands up as if freeing himself from invisible shackles. In the corner, as if from the shadows, Nitral loomed up. He had advised escaping through the window if necessary. Ix felt that he was now safe. He looked at his bed. On it lay his favorite pillow, made of soft slime. It seemed to glow, inviting him to approach it. When he touched it, he felt warmth and comfort envelope him. It wasn't just a touch, but true bliss. Ix lowered himself onto the bed and pressed himself against her, as if trying to dissolve into her embrace. The boys decided not to bother him. Meanwhile, in his residence, the Viscount was proving to the Queen that it was too expensive. Amin could make the grimoire he had requested earlier, but what was needed was 120 medium-sized grimoires per day for the winter, and as she had said, that quantity could not be less. The Viscount was indignant. After all, he had offered her his revolutionary idea, and she was ripping him off like this. Amin thought about the idea. It represented the combination of fire and wind. She would never have done that, even if the idea had visited her. She assumed that Professor Ix had done this thing, combining elemental magic with each other to make something that no one had ever thought of before. The Viscount said that the device he had invented was highly praised by the princess, so he asked for a lower rent on the item, promising to supply her with at least 30 of them. The Queen slowed him down. He continued to voice his ideas. If she ordered in bulk, they could knock down the development costs, so it would come out cheaper. Redley had offered 120 magic stones for one rental, but she would already pay 1 stone for the second one. But Amin didn't talk about the rental fee. The butler was asked to explain. He believed that the magic stone mentioned was the fuel for the item. The Queen was sorry, but speaking of these apparatuses, if he wanted to transport 30 grimoires, he'll need 3,600 magic stones. The Viscount was struck by a thunderbolt. In that instant, he realized the depth of his misfortune. The abyss of ruin lay before him. Meanwhile, Ix woke up from his carefree sleep. He felt better afterward. The boy stretched lazily. He made sure that the slime pillow was the best. The occupants of the house welcomed their host with joy. Ike was afraid that Ryuka might have harmed Rai, but the girl assured him that they had only talked a little when they met. He looked after her when she was in the slums. The guy realized that he didn't want to hurt Rai. Getting hungry, he suggested the guys have some kebabs. They made their way outside, where the morning light gently enveloped everything around them. Nitra took the first bite of his favorite dish, enjoying the aroma and taste of the meat. Ike watched his appetite with a good-natured smile. He didn't claim Nitra's food and didn't hinder his feast, allowing his friend to enjoy the moment. He wouldn't be able to eat as much as Nitra ate, but he was already hungry enough for one kebab. Voices could be heard in the distance. People were talking about the problems in the forest, which had only gotten worse. Not a single piece of magic stone had fallen today. The number of goblins in the forest had increased. The forest guards were not doing their jobs. Ike wondered if the effects of his protective magic might have run out. He refused to think about work. The guys turned to him. They thanked him for letting them stay and for the delicious kebabs. The guy asked if they were coping with the house. Rai said that she had lived in an empty house in a slum before, so she wasn't used to hardship, but it was definitely better at his place. Since she still didn't have her own place, he decided to rent another hotel room for her. The girl felt that they couldn't rely on him like that. Ike was worried if they were going to be homeless. They couldn't just leave, unless they didn't mind living in the same room with him, of course. Rai was afraid it would make him uncomfortable. The guy didn't see that as a problem, however. He was going to go home with him. Rai recognized the need to be helpful. Ike offered Nitra to share the bed with Rai. The girl slipped under the covers. He didn't realize what was happening. In gratitude for him letting her stay here, she decided to warm the bed while she slept. Nitra joined her. It was warm enough for the both of them. Ike, pulling a book from the shelf, sat down next to her. It revealed the meaning of magic. It was the application of the laws of the netherworld. It used magical elements and caused absurd results determined through the filter of the mind. Rai wondered at his emotionless recitation. Ike continued that magic was a sublime power that beasts could not understand. Elemental magic was the limit for the powerless commoner. Wizards are those who reveal the origins of the world. Therefore, they should not easily fall into the trap of contacting the void and becoming magicians. For the void are the inhabitants of the netherworld, demons whose thoughts cannot be understood in any way. When he saw that the boys were asleep, he slammed the book shut and rose from the bed. The book was so tedious that he wanted to sleep himself. The guy turned to the receptionist. He would like to rent another room. The man could only offer the attic, to which he agreed. Ike missed this room. It was cheaper than the others, so he was already used to taking care of it. Using wind purification, he cleaned the place up. The guy suddenly realized that he had said something he shouldn't have said. He hoped Rai wouldn't remember it. Beastmen, instead of having magical qualities, had unusually good physical abilities. Nobles with magical qualities were more prone to diseases than commoners, and only the gifted could deal with the void. The old man from the human race wrote this book out of envy and prejudice. Even the best books on magic were written in complicated words. Since Mistress Aixa had picked him up, he had learned a lot. He couldn't leave Rai and Nitra alone. Perhaps that was why. He wished them good dreams. The boy closed his eyes. He believed that tomorrow would start a new life and went to bed early. Ike woke up in the attic and came to one thought. Instead of renting a room, why not buy a house? The boy went to an agency. Ike had won a fortune and would like to buy a house. Adventurers bought a house when they made a fortune. He himself had long dreamed of such a house, and was going to use the gold coins Amin had given him to buy it. His budget was 5 gold coins. With such a budget, the house would have to be set up by himself, and he understood that. His enhanced magic could be used to improve his life, so any real estate was what he needed. First, a member of the agency showed them the nearest plots. The first one was called the Rock House. It looked very nice, but Ike didn't understand what the rock had to do with it. Once inside, they realized that it was a real rock. It was a designer house for the beasts, built in the image of a rock. They wanted a new lifestyle with exercise from everyday life. The bedrooms were on the 3rd floor, difficult to get to. Nitra would love it here, but certainly not him. He asked to be shown the next house for the human race. The next facility was in the slums. It was a relatively well-made house out of his price range. She pointed it out, but half of the house was a ruin. Due to the lack of a roof, the house had an open floor plan. Nitra snapped out of his seat and rushed towards Ike's. He managed to intercept the stone flying at him. The children, the slum dwellers, were not about to give up their home. From Rai's mouth, Ike's learned that it was their home. He realized where it had started. It would be livable if they could build a roof over it, but it looked like it was being used by other kids now. Ike's would like to familiarize himself with the next option. The girl reasoned that it was a little over their budget. One could get into a loan. She had a nice place she suggested they look at. It was a small but cozy cabin. It had 3 separate rooms, a kitchen and living room, and there was a market nearby. Here Ike's could definitely change things with his magic. But he was still worried about the loan, whether he could even get one without a job. The employee noticed his excitement. Offering a candy, she advised him to ask his heart. His emptiness sunk into reflection. Did he want to buy a house, even if he had to work hard to do so? Rather, it was more about the candy. Ike unwrapped the wrapper and popped the candy into his mouth. The candy was sweet and delicious. He figured they didn't need a house now. The boy apologized for asking her to show him around. Void asked if he really wanted a house. Suddenly, he stopped. Satisfied with the candy, Ike moved on to his next wish. It was the wish of a lifetime. The boy got determined. He declared to buy this house. The employee thanked him for using their firm. They went back to sign the contract. She was pleased that he had found a property that suited him. They noticed the silhouette of a girl and a man in a strict suit. His eyes stopped on the princess and his heart sank. They were expecting the great sage. The agent accompanying Ike did not expect to meet Her Royal Highness. Ike was as amazed as she was. He thought she was just playing the rich girl. He couldn't believe that this was a real princess. Indecision gripped him, and he tensed up as if preparing for something important. Lula had looked into his entire guild-related past. She found it too insulting. She felt that there was no forgiveness for them. On behalf of the 3rd Princess Lula, she apologized. Ike and the butler were stunned. The old man reprimanded her for behaving inappropriately for royalty. But Lula knew what she was doing. The butler, though he tried to object, was powerless before her determination. Ike was grateful to her, but wished she would look up. He was just tired from working for the guild, and he was perfectly fine now. He thanked her for not being mad at him. The guy wanted to say something else. He didn't know how to address her. She wanted him to call her his friend. As the eldest, the butler took the liberty to say, on behalf of the kingdom, they wanted to give him the house he desired. All this would be presented to him as a merit to the kingdom, so he could not be modest. When they asked what kind of house the great sage would like to live in, he named something inexpensive, suitable for humans and beast men. They had a suitable option: a newly built house for 1 gold coin. Ix realized he had forgotten to include possessions in the terms. The royal court prepared carriages to go there. They arrived at the place. In front of them stood a majestic palace that rose several stories above the ground. From today, a great sage would live here. Ix doubted that such a large mansion was worth only 1 gold coin. The reason was its former owner was a criminal that was sent to the mines. The former guild master owned such a house. Therefore, the starting price at the auction was no more than 1 gold coin, which met all his needs. It's cheap, spacious, and designed for humans. If that was the only drawback, Ix doubted he was worthy of such a wonderful home. He turned to the void. She, like a shadow, slipped from his cloak. Easily and gracefully the void managed to jump out, which attracted the attention of the guards. It was their duty to protect the princess. Ix's friends also noticed the strange creature. The void had become so material that it was now visible to those around him. Ix assumed that meant he had reached the 3rd stage of a mage. His emptiness was growing stronger and stronger, which meant that there was less and less of the human left in him. A wise man said that if the void completely invades your body and materializes, you may well become a demon king, a devil, or a hermit. The void has different values and morals than humans. Therefore, the mages who passed to the 3rd stage left the human settlements, in view of which their future fate was known to them. Butler examined the void to make sure it was not dangerous. When he found nothing hostile in it, he used a wish-reading device. The void's wish struck him. When the princess read it, a smile played across her face. She burst into loud laughter. Lula said that it was quite in the spirit of the great magician. The butler, agreeing, added that rumors were unreliable. He apologized for their rudeness. Void looked pleadingly at Ix. He, unable to bear her gaze, made a decision. This house belonged to them now. Nitra and Rai were allowed to tour the house inside. The butler addressed him. A little while later they would pick up the artisans and caretaker for him. He could report anything they needed. Hinting that the Grand Mage should also take a walk around the mansion, the princess was about to leave them. She looked forward to the next meeting. Ike shouted words of thanks. The carriage left for the castle. The princess grinned at something. It was the wish of the demon the great mage had made a pact with. It was quite amusing. Even the old man was surprised by it. It was as if there was something good hidden in the void that the whole world called evil. She wanted her home. Since they were going to live here, Rai asked Ike to hire her as a real maid. Attempts to reassure her were unsuccessful. His new mansion was very spacious, so she could help with the cleaning. If he entrusted the house to her, she would take care of everything. Initially, Ike was just looking for a house that the three of them could live in. He hoped that way she would be happy and her anxiety would go away. But perhaps getting some sort of occupation would make it easier for her to stay. He himself would appreciate it if she would take over the housework. Then he proposed to do so. The girl promised to do her best. Ike jingled in his pockets. He gave her a coin for her needs, thinking it would be enough for a few years. Rai trembled, unable to believe her eyes. The coin was gold. That was really a lot of money. He himself had never had such a coin until recently, so he understood her. The guy asked what kind of salary she expected. The girl replied that she didn't need a salary. He asked her to contact him if the need arose. Rai thanked him for his concern. Ike decided to look for Nitra and the Void. He thought he heard their voices. They walked down the hallway. Nitra and Void, as if mesmerized, did not take their eyes off of something. They huddled in the kitchen, studying the endless water jug Ike's had made. His fireball that wouldn't go out in the stove was here, as well as his pet fairies. The Void must have used his magic. He wanted Ike's to praise him. Ike's, with genuine enthusiasm, thanked him, calling him delightful. Rai joined him with genuine warmth. Ike's hoped all those compliments wouldn't put him in a tizzy. The boys suggested he was done moving. He told the Void to go back to his place. He couldn't go outside. They would play some more in a little while. Ike's reasoned that a futon was needed first. The boys knew where to buy one. They arrived at a furniture store. But Ike's didn't know which one to choose. The consultant suggested that he check for himself how comfortable they were. The first model was incredibly airy and pleasant. He couldn't resist and decided to buy it. Rai noticed that this branded futon was very expensive. She strongly recommended checking the comfort of other futons before buying it. The girl understood that this was also part of the maid's duties. The trip to the store had worn him out. He thanked Nitra for helping him carry his things and the futon, and Rai for helping him choose. After all, some futons were so expensive just because they belonged to a popular brand. There were a lot of good bedding in the store, just from less popular brands. Looking around the house had finally exhausted Ike's, and he decided to rest. Void expressed a desire to play. However, Ike's put it off until tomorrow. Void had to entertain himself on his own. He created an ice ball that adorned the shelf. His imagination was drawing how the boys would react to this marvel. Suddenly his gaze fell on the paintings, and a daring idea popped into his head. He reinforced the paintings and took them off the walls. Rai was shaken up, disturbing her sleep. Nitra loomed over her. He called her over to see something amazing. She, being sleepy, didn't understand anything yet. Nitra fairly opened the door. The paintings previously hanging on the walls were now floating in the air. Jumping on one, Nitra pulled it behind her. They shouldn't have climbed on the paintings. The paintings, lined up in rows, moved forward along the corridor. Nitra moved over to her, making her startled. Rai realized they shouldn't be doing this. But the doubts dissolved instantly. It was actually quite fun. As they stopped, they were met with the emptiness of the Lord. The boys guessed that he had done it. Void, pleased, blushed involuntarily. They knew he liked getting compliments. Nitra managed to get an apple for breakfast. Rai, unable to contain her delight, shrieked with joy as she enclosed his head in her arms. They all wanted to give it to their master. But before, Rai offered to cut him up to make it easier to eat. The knife in her hand gave her a more intimidating look. And once she was done, they would change. Ike's was sleeping a deep, peaceful sleep when suddenly the silence was broken by a quiet knock. The boys had brought him breakfast. There was an apple on today's menu. The boy grimaced. Rai added that it was the apple that Nitra had brought. Ike's thanked them both and started eating his breakfast. The guys mentioned the little guy, who was also doing his best. The house looked amazing now. Guy decided he would definitely look at it. He reminded Rai not to forget herself. She was doing a great job as a maid, for which he was grateful. Rai promised to keep working hard. Ryuka wondered what Ike's was doing right now. She really wanted to see him. Ike's, a small sickly boy, was 10 years old. After his parents were attacked by bandits and he became an orphan, his aunt and uncle took care of him. He was grateful to them for the roof over his head. The boy didn't know what he could do for them. He overheard the boys talking where one of them, returning with his father from hunting, had come across a place with maple crabs. The redwoods were dangerous. Several people died there every year. However, he insisted on going there himself. According to Uncle Ike's, everything didn't grow well in the redwoods, as the forest sucked the life out of everything. Just then, they called out to him, making him involuntarily wince. The boys offered to join them in catching maple crabs. He'd been looking at them the whole time because he wanted to go too. But in return, they demanded that he not tell anyone about it. The maple crabs were red and flavorful. It was his uncle's favorite food, so he agreed to go with him. They arrived at a redwood forest. The white trunks and red leaves were very beautiful. It was funny that they were shaped like hands. The atmosphere in the forest was getting tense, and the boys' courage was fading rapidly. However, the boy assured them that the crabs were not far away. Finally, they discovered their target. Maple crabs glided across the surface among the red leaves. There was an unbelievable amount of them, so the boys set about collecting them. As they gathered them, Ike's believed that with so many of them, he might get one too. As the boys were having fun with the crabs, something went wrong. When they looked up, they were struck with a chilling horror. A whole flock of spiny reapers was hovering over the forest. They retreated, leaving Ike alone with the monsters. The boy didn't understand anything yet, but the buzzing shadow had caught up with him. He knew he'd be in trouble if he got stung. Suddenly, a girl with elf ears stood up for him. Her firebomb destroyed the enemy. She thought she heard a noise, so she flew over to check it out. This girl seemed incredibly beautiful to him. The second he did, he came to his senses. Ike thanked her for saving him. The stranger thought, his legs have lost strength. She asked him not to overexert himself. The girl assumed he wasn't a fire diamond. She sensed great magical talent in him, even surpassing her, and was sure that when he grew up, he would be an incredible mage. If he had a weak body, it was typical of those whose magic was off the charts. Ike admitted that he was often sick and had no stamina, so his uncle called him a wimp. Because of this, he was unable to help, even though they let him live under their roof. And he was worried that if he got sick, he caused them a lot of trouble. The girl decided to offer him something. He could move in with her. She wanted to unlock his dormant power, so she asked if he would be her apprentice. The beautiful stranger he'd seen today for the first time and who'd saved him, whose name he didn't know, had suddenly declared that he could become an incredible magician. He decided he shouldn't blindly take her word for it. Except, if it meant that he, someone who could do nothing, could change right now, then so be it. He asked the teacher to help him. In that case, she was expecting him at her place tonight. She was only worried about his family. The boy thought that if he was gone, his uncle and aunt would be happier. They were going to go together. But something made Ike hang on to it. His uncle came home after another tiring day. No one was home yet. Looking around the room, he noticed something in the corner. On the table was a plate of maple crabs. He thought they'd been eaten yesterday. Beside the plate was a note from Ike thanking him for everything they had done for him. The elfess had brought him into her home. The boy never would have thought there could be so many houses on such a large tree. The girl's house was nicely decorated with plants on the inside. The elfess offered refreshments. She placed a plate of flavored liquid on the table. It had been a long time since Ike had eaten such delicious food, and he was extremely grateful to her. This flavor was unfamiliar to him. The girl told him that she had tried using maple crab extract. Now Ike knew what maple crab tasted like. It was so delicious that a tear glistened in his eye. Suddenly, she remembered that she hadn't introduced herself. Alice was a high elf, and from now on, he would call himself Ix. From now on, he would be reborn. This name was derived from Excalibur, the sword exalted above all swords. So, he officially became Alice's apprentice. And so 5 years passed. During those years, the insecure boy learned a lot. The boy told his teacher that he would be away for a while. He was now capable of using high-level magic and flying, which was a frightening growth. But that wasn't all of this kid's talent. Alice was anticipating what would happen next. She thought about what to make for dinner. Ix arrived at a place where no one should be. Today, he was going to become a mage to surpass Alice. On the path of learning magic, there was an inevitable obstacle in front of humans. Because magic didn't belong to humans, but to the inhabitants of the void. So there was a limit to what humans could imitate. To reproduce magic flawlessly, humans needed to pay a price for it, to negotiate with the void. To become a magician, a person would open an irrevocable tunnel in his body and share his life with a void dweller. Alice taught him never to become a mage. But he wanted to live up to the expectations of Alice, who had accepted him that day. He was even willing to become a magician for that. The creature greeted the man who wanted to make a pact with the void. It presented itself as a guide, a mediator. He had everything he wanted, and he would have to pay a price for it. Ix was willing to give him anything. The guide asked about something that concerned his own life. However, he was not afraid of such a sacrifice either. But did the guide really want that? He had quite a few lives. He would take something else. Ix's insides churned with fear. The guide noticed that there was something about the boy that fit. Talent. From now on, his body would not grow, and he would not be able to use the high-level magic he had studied so hard. Such would be the price he would pay him. Ix has given his consent.